All right. Good morning, everybody. We'll start in about 30 seconds. I'm 4 minutes late. That never happens. All right. Okay. First of all, before we begin today, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded Anishinaabe territory. The people of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for a millennia. The City of Ottawa honors the people of the Anishinaabe Nation, and the city honors all First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions. Speaker's good there now? Great. So at this point, I'll get our clerk to take roll call, please, our committee coordinator. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning, Kelly and Tim.
Councillor Truster.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. First of all, no declarations of interest. Seeing none, the confirmation of the minutes from PWIC, yes, Tuesday, the 27th, 2025, is that item carried?
Great.
We have response to inquiry, Vimy Memorial Bridge. That was included in the package. I'll just clear the agenda. Item number 5, motion by Councillor Brown, Road Safety Action Plan and Funding. You've probably seen the recirculation. If you haven't, it's on the screen right now, if we have it. All aspects related to ASC have been removed, and Councillor Devine, you did raise that. So we do not have speakers on this specific item. Is that right, Kelly? I think we have one on the next one, though. So if this item is carried, is it carried? Or do you need it held? Oh, sorry, I forgot. Councillor Kitts must read it in first. Apologies.
Therefore, be it resolved that Public Works and Infrastructure Committee recommend council direct staff to identify up to 10 million and direct funding in 2026 to the Warranted Traffic Control Devices Program to further reduce the current backlog of warranted intersections in need of funding.
And just before, for committee's knowledge, looking for confirmation from staff, this doesn't change anything that they're already doing, and it is not pillaging out of the ASC funds or changing anything. The wording is now modified to ensure that, correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. So is that item carried? Thank you. On to item number 5.2. Very similar. There is a delegation no. The wording was modified in Councillor Plants as well. I'll get Councillor Kitts to read it in first so we're all aware of it. If that's okay, Councillor Kitts. And we will hold this item.
Therefore, be it resolved that Public Works and Infrastructure Committee recommend council direct staff to include in the 2025 Road Safety Action Plan annual report a plan including the estimated required funding to implement the backlog of pedestrian crossovers at all warranted locations citywide by 2030. Additionally, that staff be further directed to actively seek opportunities to fund the plan to eliminate the backlog by 2030.
Great, thank you. And again, Councillor Devine also expressed concerns about that. That's why the rewording took place, and thanks to Councillor Plant, but we do have a delegation, so we will hold that item if they wish to speak. Maybe I'll just ask who is in there. John Verbaas. John Verbaas, just knowing that the agenda might go long, do you still wish to speak today? Great, so we'll hold that item. Item number 6.1, we have no presentations, no delegations. We do have something that Councillor Johnson did want to read in. Oh, Isaac. Is Isaac Ransom online? And while we wait for that, maybe I'll get Councillor Johnson has some direction to staff. Councillor Johnson, if you wanted to go ahead and read that in.
Thank you very much. So this is on 6.1, the e-scooter season and extension of the pilot program. So understanding that the purpose of this report is to expand the program through delegated authority of staff. The direction asks that staff still consult with the local ward councillor for some context sensitivity as those locations are identified so that there's no surprises. And so the direction, and thank you to Jennifer Armstrong for writing it for me. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to consult with the ward councillor on any proposed expansion to the e-scooter deployment zone within their ward beyond what was allowed for the 2024 season, and that this include consultation with the community, such as meetings with the BIA or community association as determined through conversations or discussions with the councillor. Thank you.
Great. So I know that Mr. Ransom is obviously in favor. So at this point, if there's no one that wants to hold this item, okay, they all start quick. Define quick. I just want to make sure. Okay, please proceed.
My question was just that we're going to extend the pilot and we're going to expand the geographic area. But unless I missed it, I didn't see that the number of scooters was going to be increased. Will there be an opportunity for the businesses to increase the number of scooters if the demand is there?
Yeah, Jennifer will speak to what's in the report.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for the question through you, Chair. There would be a commensurate increase in the fleet size with any increase in the deployment area based on operational requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. It was quick. You were right. Thank you. So on this item, is this item carried? Thank you. Happy scooting, everybody. We'll move on to item number 6. This is going to be, I think, our longer one, but it'll be a fun one. And I know Lane's very passionate about this and many other around the table about the amendments to the residential boulevard gardening regulations and care and control. We have a presentation by our amazing staff, and we do have, I believe, a few delegations. So we'll hold this item. I will continue through the agenda. Item number 6.3, this is a little more belt and suspenders. The administrative and enforcement amendments of the right-of-way bylaws. Anyone want to hold this item, or is this item carried? Carried, thank you. Item number 7.1, I want to thank Scott Caldwell. We do have a presentation if need be, but Scott, you've done a terrific job on parking and speaking to colleagues in advance. You can see it's in front of you here. We have the recommendation. Does anyone wish to want to hold parking? I know it's exciting stuff. Seeing no one that wishes to hold this item, is this item carried? Thank you very much, Scott. You did a terrific job on explanations in advance to our colleagues and answering their questions. 8.1, status update on Public Works and Infrastructure Committee inquiries for the period ending March 14th, 2025. Is this item received? Received, great. And now there is one item that I did want to, motions of which were previously given. We'll deal with that. We'll hold that item. And does anyone, do people want to hold that item? Perfect. And we do have delegations on that item, so we'll hold that. There is one item we're looking at adding to the agenda. We could hold people here all day, but we've worked very hard on this one about the celebration of the 200th anniversary of ByTown. Can I add that to the agenda now, everybody? Is that fine? Thank you. So with that, maybe I'll get that on the screen. Unless you want me to do an Irish jig, you've probably already heard all this stuff, but nonetheless, whereas the recent approved Byward Market and Laurier West Heritage Conservation District Plan recognizes these neighborhoods that have been home to diverse communities, whereas the new plans to encourage the city to explore opportunities to incorporate interpretation that celebrates many of the histories associated with the neighborhood, whereas the upcoming 200th anniversary of Byward and the 200th anniversary of the Byward Market both provide great opportunities for the recognition of the city's evolution, whereas the Irish Society of the National Capital has expressed an interest in installing commemorative blades, recognizing the significance of the Irish settlement in Lowertown in the 19th century during the construction of the Rideau Canal, and later people that were fled the Irish potato famine. And the Lower Town Community Association to express interest in a broader commemorative naming project. This is a great opportunity to enrich Ottawa's history in our oldest neighborhood. And whereas this type can be completed with the existing resources and budget, therefore it be resolved that staff work with the Irish Society, National Capital Region to install sign blades recognizing the historic significance of the Irish diaspora in Lower Town, and be it further resolved that staff are directed more broadly to work with the Ward Councillor, Lower Town Community Association, and the stakeholders to develop and implement a plan for commemorative street signs recognizing the history of Lower Town and the Byward Market. And if this item carries, I'd just like to throw in a couple of quick words on this one, thanking some of the staff. Anyone want to hold this item for discussion? If it's a quick one.
It is, Chair. Thank you. Is the intention to install these blades at the same time as the 200th anniversary, or what are the timelines?
So real brief, because Court, I know the answer, and while you're making your way down, you're the one I want to thank. I feel pretty confident this will carry. Court's worked very hard on this. We have the 200th this year for the Byward, 200 for the Byward Market. They're in conceding years or in the next 2 years. And Court, maybe you just want to explain how exciting this project is, not just for the Irish, but for many of the cultures that are in the neighborhood that we're going to be celebrating with commemorative blades.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Last year when Council approved the Heritage Conservation District Plan for Lower Town and Byward, there was a recommendation to install commemorative blades throughout the two districts. The Irish Society of Ottawa approached us about recognizing the Irish community within Byward and Lower Town. However, as we know, there's many cultures and histories beyond Irish. And so staff are proposing to embark upon a project that is multi-yeared. So this year we would embark upon the Irish signage, but the intention is to align with next year's 200th anniversary celebrations of ByTown and the 200th anniversary celebrations of Byward in 2027 with the rollout of the other sign blades. So it'll be a 3-year rollout.
Great. Thank you. Great question, fellow Irishman, Riley Brockington. On that, is this item carried? Thank you. And I want to thank Court, working with so many communities involved, the ward councillor as well, Councillor Plant. And I know our good friends at the Irish Society, as much as we don't have a parade this year, we are going to do it up big. And there's some exciting stuff coming. And I want to thank our Irish friends, Tom O'Neill, the president of the Irish Society. I know Teresa Kavanagh is over here too, smiling as well. Thank you for that, everybody. And thank you, Court. So we'll go back to, I guess, the first held item on the agenda. We have item 5.2. And at this point, I think we're going straight to delegations. Great. Mr. Verbas, you're no stranger. The microphone's there. You have 5 minutes. And as indicated, the motion in front of us has been modified. And when you begin speaking, the 5 minutes will commence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to be here again today. I last appeared before this committee in November, and that was also when the Road Safety Action Plan annual report was before this committee. And the Road Safety Action Plan is again on the agenda, so I'm back here again. Just by way of introduction, I was involved in the initial public consultations in 2019 when the parameters of this project were being discussed. And I've been participating in the quarterly working group meetings of the Road Safety Action Plan since 2020. And I'm also serving as the chair of the Transportation Committee of the FCA. And so we have monthly meetings and we have a fairly active discussion list. And this item on today's agenda was something we discussed quite actively on the list. And so I thought I would come in today and kind of relate to you a little bit the gist of that conversation. Basically, the members of the committee overwhelmingly felt that the direction of the road safety action plan should stay faithful to its original intent, which is to be data-driven. So how can we invest our limited resources to most effectively lower serious injuries and deaths on the road? And so we're a little bit uncomfortable when motions start coming up to try to tug the program in this direction or that direction. And so I just wanted to convey that to you. Also to say that our committee is pretty broadly, the membership is pretty broad. So you can't really say that we're a bunch of spandex wearing cyclists or grannies with walkers or things like that. We're fairly broadly distributed by geography and by how we primarily move around in the city. So I'd encourage you to take this feedback as broadly representative, I think, of how the public in general would view this. So in terms of the specifics of what we were talking about, the program is meant to be driven by the complex question of how can we most effectively lower injuries and deaths on the road. And we were wrestling with that, and the fact that there are many safety-related projects that are all vastly oversubscribed in terms of the need, whether it's implementing more traffic lights, implementing PXOs like the current motion. Remember in 2020, there was an initiative to say, what are the high volume cycling intersections that needed, that could use with safety upgrades, and 30 intersections were identified at a cost of $32 million. So the needs are great, and that's why we have to remain focused on what does the data tell us in terms of what actions will be most effective. So in terms of what the request would be, and I'm repeating the request that I made in the November presentation that I made, is it's a complex issue, and for the past several years, the annual report has come to this committee at the same meeting as the budget meeting. And the result of that is basically it gets glossed over as quickly as possible because everyone wants to get on to discussing the budget. So one way that you can demonstrate that you're going to grapple more with the complexity of this issue is to try to bring the annual report at the end of this year at a meeting other than the budget meeting. So I'd like to repeat that request and just leave you with the thought that we do have a historic opportunity here through this program to make a big difference in safety on the roads in Ottawa. And so I welcome more attention from this committee to grappling with the difficult issues involved here. Thank you.
Great. And before we go to questions, please don't leave, John. Again, I had similar concerns. I think touching EASC money or doing anything that's not data-driven, I do not support. And that's why we saw Councillor Brown and Councillor Plant, after I had spoken with them and based on the committee feedback as well, we shared the same view. It's got to be driven by data. Councillor Plant amended her motion, as you can see, just like Councillor Brown's. They don't access that, and you've heard that already from staff, but we do have a question from Councillor Devine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, just as much as just a comment, and I do appreciate your delegation. Certainly on the issue of access to that RSAP annual report outside of, the high pressure tank of budget, I can absolutely appreciate that. I know that I had my own concerns about the fact that the current RSAP term, which is 2020 to 2024, we don't really have an opportunity to review and revise that until 2027. And I'm sure there are good reasons for that, but that poses a challenge to try to address how it might go forward. But just to reassure you, one of the reasons why the motions that we just passed today, the Brown motion and the Plant motion, no longer draw from ASC and red light camera revenue is largely because of the concern that I wanted to meet, which is that any kind of redirection of that revenue that might alter the balance of the 4 pillars in the road safety action plan goes against the principles of the road safety action plan. So I certainly recognize your concern, and just like yourself, I do want to continue to advance that we direct those limited resources towards data-driven results. And I think there's lots of investigation and hopefully improvement that can happen in that area. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would say that both of those motions substantially did improve. But the motion on the PXOs, it could have been even better if the motion said, directed the staff to confirm or verify if investing faster in implementing PXOs would actually lead to a greater improvement in road safety. There's a subtle distinction there. I don't know if you could follow me, but it's basically pushing a little harder on the data to say, if we spent more money faster on PXOs, is that more effective at reducing injuries on the road than some other action?
Great. Thanks for your points today. Thank you for coming out today. So on that item, is that item carried? Thank you. Now we're on to the Floral Festival in Boulevards. All right. Come on down, Rob. Friends. Great. Thank you very much. We're all waiting with bated breath, daisy breath. I don't know what we're doing here. All right. So thank you very much for coming down today. We have a great presentation from our amazing staff, and then we'll go to delegations and questions of staff as per usual. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. By way of introduction, my name is Rob McLachlan. I'm the Program Manager of the Right-of-Way Branch. And with me this morning is Kevin Lamer, Program Manager of the Inspections Branch. Morning. And as noted by the Chair, we have a presentation this morning with respect to the item regarding amendments to the residential boulevard guarding provisions in use and care. So just by way of background before we get going, and just to make sure we're all situated as to what we're talking about the boulevard section of the right-of-way in front of residentially zoned property. And historically, that's been regulated under the city's use and care of roads bylaw, where traditionally residents were not allowed to impact the grass in front of their property in that boulevard. But in 2023, there were amendments made by council through the recommendation of this committee to allow for boulevard gardening within that area subject to certain parameters. At that time, those parameters did not include the permission to grow food or to install raised planters or containers. And staff were directed as part of that to report back on the possibility of doing so following evidence and guidance received from Public Health Ontario. After reaching out to Public Health Ontario, as it turned out, there was no evidence or guidance to be given, and instead they suggested that we do our own jurisdictional scan and make our own decision as to and recommendation with respect to what should be done, which is what we did. So we looked at 13 municipalities across Canada who also have similar residential boulevard gardening allowances within their bylaws. And what was seen was that generally speaking, there was an allowance, although it wasn't consistent in how it was done, to permit the growing of food. There were also similar provisions with respect to planters as well as containers in terms of how those could be accommodated within the right-of-way. When looking at that benchmarking across Canada, as well as talking to our different operational groups within the city, consulting with stakeholders, as well as looking to an online survey that was filled out by more than 1,400 residents with respect to the proposal that we're bringing forward today, we were able to come up with the recommendations that we're going to walk you through now. So turning firstly to the idea of allowing food growth within the right-of-way, based on what we've seen in other municipalities, Staff recommend that food growth be allowed as part of a residential boulevard garden within the right-of-way. Along with that, we're recommending allowances for plant supports, such as a bean pole or a cage, to help facilitate that, provided that they meet the overarching and existing height limits for residential boulevard gardens and are removed on a seasonal basis. I'll say obviously, but one of the key risks that's come up through all of this is the risk of food production and that it cannot be guaranteed in terms of the quality of the soil within the boulevard. There are potentials with respect to soil contamination. There's air contamination from salt, from exhaust, from dust, etc., as well as risks from animal waste, as well as, I'll say, theft from those passing by. So with that, the city cannot guarantee the suitability of the boulevard in front of a resident's property with respect to plantings. And to do so would be to continue with the same theme that is currently in place with the regulations, which is that it's done at the resident's own risk. Moving to the idea of raised planter beds, one of the key pieces of guidance coming from Ottawa Public Health was that if the soil quality is unknown or there are concerns around contamination, one way to get around that would be to allow for soil separated raised garden beds within the right-of-way as well as containers, which we're recommending be done, subject to certain regulations that you can see on the slide. In particular, we're not recommending that certain materials be allowed to be employed to construct these, for example, bricks or stone. We would want to see these out of wood construction where they could easily be dismantled, or if they did happen to come into contact with a city plow, for example, then it wouldn't have a greater potential for damage. Also as well, the maximum height of a raised planter bed is proposed to be at 45 centimeters. This is to allow sufficient soil depth for rooted vegetables, but not being so large in size that it creates an obstacle should it need to be removed for a capital project or as a result of utility works. Here again, I would stress that the overall total height as exists within the bylaw currently would remain at 1 meter. So whatever is planted within a raised bed would need to respect that overarching height of 1 meter. And within a corner site triangle, that's further reduced to 0.75 meters. There would be a requirement to maintain these raised garden beds in a good state of repair. And since they are not to be removed at the end of the season, there are setbacks that are being proposed as well, as are provided on the visuals here on the slide. Where there is no sidewalk, we're proposing a 1.5 meter setback from the roadway edge. This aligns within the water bylaw what we require for a setback for a fire hydrant, and helps to make sure that these remain clear of snow clearing operations in the winter, allow room for snow storage, and as well, certainly on higher speed roads, don't impact the clear zone where there's a potential for collision with these. Where there is a sidewalk, we're recommending a setback of 0.6 meters from that sidewalk to allow for sidewalk plows to operate safely, and are not recommending that they be permitted within the outer boulevard. So as you can see on the below left-hand image, where there is an outer boulevard, we're recommending that they do not be permitted for the reason that A, you cannot guarantee the 1.5 meter setback similar to when there is not a sidewalk. As well, you're creating a pinch point potentially where you've got a sidewalk plow now going through a raised bed on both sides. Respecting that the boulevard varies in its, I'll say, size and extent in front of the various properties across Ottawa, and appreciating that a raised garden bed based on the provisions proposed may not be able to be accommodated in front of all properties, we're also recommending that movable containers, be permitted as well. We're not suggesting any particular parameters around the size, type, etc., to provide flexibility, other than they should be movable and should be removed at the end of the season, which would mean removing them by November the 15th. Here again, the total combined height of anything within a container would not be suggested to be allowed to exceed the 1 meter height limit, and within a corner site triangle, the 0.75 meter height limit. In terms of where planters are proposed to be placed within the right-of-way, We're looking at a distinction between lower speed roads where there's a speed limit of less than 40 kilometers an hour. And in those instances, proposing a setback of 0.5 meters from the roadway edge. This is to align with what we currently allow for a free library box. Where you have higher class roads, such as a major collector or an arterial, if there is no sidewalk, then mirroring the setback proposed for raised planters of 1.5 meters. And where there is a sidewalk, not permitting them between the sidewalk and the roadway. Here again, to make sure that that clear area is not impacted should a vehicle inadvertently exit the road and these planters become a potential projectile or provide further damage to the car, and also to give room for winter operations. Overall, in terms of owner responsibility, we had investigated in such situations whether or not a formal permit or letter of acknowledgement would be something to pursue in relation to allowing food growth. It's something we see in other municipalities, for example, in Thunder Bay. But given the intent with these regulations when first enacted in 2023 was to have a clear, simplistic, and easy to follow and easy to enforce set of rules that wasn't overly burdensome for residents and overly burdensome for staff to administer. We're not at this time suggesting that a letter or permit be provided or required. Instead, the existing provisions within the bylaw that speak to a requirement for residents to indemnify or to release the city with respect to any damage be extended to encapsulate the instances of growing food or permitting raised beds and containers. In the same vein, given that this is done at the resident's own risk, a reminder as well that under these provisions, neither the city nor a public utility is responsible should these need to be moved or if they're damaged as a result of operations by either of those parties. And this would likewise apply to raised garden beds, and containers placed in the boulevard. As I've been mentioning throughout the presentation with respect to the height limits, I'll note again that the existing provisions that were set in 2023 with respect to setbacks from utility pedestals, from fire hydrants, and from trees are not proposed to be changed. And similarly, that overarching height limit is not proposed to be adjusted either. And to speak a little bit about that, that is generally because when we look at the 1 meter height limit, that's on average the vehicle visibility for a driver coming out of their driveway. So we don't want to impede or obstruct that for safety reasons. And similarly, when it comes to access to utility infrastructure, we want those setbacks left clear in order to make sure that they can be safely accessed and are not impacted. In terms of implementation and next steps, should these recommendations be approved by council, we're going to be working with Ottawa Public Health to publish guidelines for all residents in order to provide advice on native species, how to reduce the risks associated with growing food within the right-of-way. So, for example, washing your vegetables, as well as looking at other gardening practices that would be beneficial and providing awareness of the provisions that are now in place. Similarly, with the now annual information campaign that we provide in the spring to advise that these activities are available for residents to undertake in the boulevard, we'll be adding in the food growth piece to those messages as well. We'll be updating staff in terms of knowing what those provisions are from an enforcement perspective. And as exists now, we'll continue with inquiries being directed to 311 should residents have questions. And from there, there'll be, as noted earlier, there'll be guidance and there'll be web data on ottawa.ca. So I'll say in conclusion, the recommendations that you have before you today, we think strike a balance as we did in 2023 between allowing an opportunity for food growth within the right-of-way, be it through in-soil or in raised planter beds or containers, while still ensuring that operations can continue and that the activities are done safely relative to other activities that are occurring within the right-of-way, such as pedestrians, cyclists, and cars using that space as well. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm the chair. We will now go to delegations and then we'll come back to questions to staff. So our first delegation is Kate Viano. Perfect. You can come up, join us up here. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. You have 5 minutes. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. I want to start by saying how truly enthused I am to be speaking to you about the proposals brought forward by city staff. We delegated to this committee 2 years ago to speak to the critical need to enable residents to grow food in the residential boulevard. And we truly congratulate staff for the hard work that has gone into this file over this time, incorporating both the expertise from community stakeholders and the input from residents. The proposed updates presented here today show that the city can and will prioritize solutions that enable our local food system. And we're almost there. There are still a few very tangible changes that we ask to be made to ensure that this bylaw truly supports a fulsome approach to a sustainable, resilient food system that benefits all residents and the city equitably. One of the core issues that continues to come up is a false divide between so-called edible and non-edible plants. This distinction fails to account for the fact that all plants play an interconnected role in supporting local food security. If we limit the ability to plant a variety of diverse vegetation, we are directly limiting our capacity to grow food. Pollinators rely on a variety of plants to thrive, and in turn, they ensure the productivity of food gardens. These plants are not just ornamental, they are essential, and these requested changes are in scope of creating an enabling policy to grow food in the residential boulevard. We're asking for the following changes to be made to the bylaw update. First, we are seeking for the bylaw to address sightline concerns rather than limit plant height to 1 meter across the whole boulevard. 1 meter rules out many common varieties of plants like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, sunflowers, herbs, especially when considering the height limit must include the container or raised bed depth as well. And keep in mind, the City of Ottawa is unique, with a bylaw such as this being applicable across urban, suburban, and rural settings. Residential boulevards range from less than 1 meter up to, in some cases, 20 meters, given this context. We're asking that the bylaw state that safe sightlines must be maintained in the immediate setback from the road and/or sidewalk, rather than across the entire residential boulevard. We're also seeking the restriction of the use of commercial pesticides, herbicides, and rodenticides in residential boulevards. This measure is essential for long-term soil health, remediation, and the prevention of contamination that can affect our food systems, pollinators, and overall ecosystem. The residential boulevard is where much of a property's water runoff drains into the wastewater system, meaning any chemicals applied there contribute directly to environmental pollution. While we recognize that prohibiting chemicals in this specific area will not eliminate all runoff concerns, it is a crucial step in shifting individual practices toward more sustainable land stewardship and environmental responsibility. Importantly, this ask does not override city maintenance decisions regarding the use of chemicals to combat noxious invasive species. It simply ensures that we are being proactive and mindful of committing to long-term, informed, sustainable stewardship of residential boulevards. Lastly, we are asking for a clear, accessible process that would allow residents to plant trees in the residential boulevard at their own cost with city approval. We understand that Plant Your Place is being launched in mere days, enabling the planting of free trees on private property, and also includes some excellent native varieties that are not offered through Trees in Trust. And this is really great news. We also understand that the variety of trees offered through Trees in Trust are very limited in terms of edible varieties. They still include invasive species and are limited in quantity each year. These options are insufficient to provide equitable access to a tree of choice for residents who can only plant a tree in their boulevard given their property. Implementing a structured approval mechanism would ensure responsible planting that aligns with city guidelines, while also advancing urban canopy goals, climate resilience, and food security. This proposal recognizes the responsibilities associated with boulevard tree planting and builds on existing permitting structures to create a fair and equitable process. Councillors, this is about more than just boulevard gardens. This is about ensuring that all residents are enabled with equitable access to growing food of choice, fostering biodiversity, and building collective resilience against climate change. We urge you to support these additional changes to the bylaw. Thank you for your time. And again, thank you very much for the hard work that's gone into this today.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Looking around, Seeing no questions, I know that Lane has been actively taking notes on this one, and we're working on something here too that might satisfy some people. So thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate it. Next up, we do have, I believe, a video. Yep, we got Dr. Eugene Waters, and we'll go ahead and proceed with that. So we'll go to the next one. Erica Shardlow, we have a presentation from Cafes. We'll just look for Erica. Angela, I'm just promoting you right now. Well, not me. I don't have that magic power. Oh, there we go. Okay, it says Angela, but you don't look like Angela. There we go. Hi, Erica.
My name. Hello.
Yes, we'll get your presentation up on the screen right now. You're no stranger to this place, and you have 5 minutes, and it's up on the screen. We're good to go. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Erica. I'm from Cafes. I'm the Trees and Green Space Coordinator. If you could go to the next slide, please. I know many of you may know Cafes. We are a local network of climate and environmental leaders. Next slide, please. This is just a quick overview of what I'll be speaking about, so we can move on and go to the next slide. So I just wanted to start today by saying that we absolutely support the recommendations presented by staff to allow growing food on the boulevard with permanent structures. This is a very positive step forward. We're really excited about these changes and just really commend the incredible efforts put forward by staff. Next slide. So one of the biggest items that we are still wanting to see in terms of boulevard food planting involves more edible trees being made available in Trees and Trust, including native fruit and nut trees. When talking about growing food, we recognize that this doesn't stop at just garden plants. So we feel that talking about trees here is within scope. We need a holistic view, and edible varieties of trees contribute to food growth, food security, climate resilience, and a diverse canopy. The Trees and Trust species list still includes several species that are considered invasive or near invasive, like ornamental pear. We really need to make sure these are getting removed. Next slide. So these bylaw updates are an opportunity to consider allowing residents to purchase and plant trees themselves on the boulevard. There are many ways a permission mechanism or guidelines can be put in place. And for single fronting households, not just corner lots, we think it would be really great to have 2 or more trees permitted for their space. Some lots, the boulevard may be the only space where residents can really have trees, so we need to maximize it. And I'll note that we are very excited about the Plant Your Place program coming into effect. So we think that's really amazing. Next slide. So residents planting their own trees is a really cost-effective way to increase canopy. Currently, the cost to plant a caliber tree by the city is just over $1,100, including tax. So let's just assume 1,000 residents planted a tree on the boulevard themselves over a span of 10 years, and let's just say half survive. This alone could lead to a $5.62 million in cost savings to the city. In terms of ecological value, according to many different sources, a mature tree could be valued at around $10,000 for the services they provide in their life up to that point, like stormwater retention, carbon capture, cooling. So these 10 years of residents planting on the boulevard could eventually have an ecological value of $50 million. Studies have found that trees can add 3 to 15% to property values, which is huge. So bottom line, massive boost in savings and value to the city if we allow residents to plant trees. Next slide. Okay, so moving on, we also suggest allowing alternative ground cover plants instead of turf grass in the boulevard. Ground cover plants are far more beneficial than grass. Having plants at the base of trees provides critical habitat for many insects who actually complete their life cycle in the vegetation below trees. Ground cover plants absorb more water than grass. They reduce maintenance, reduce the need for mowing or weed whacking, which has been known to very often damage tree trunks. Next slide. We also suggest prohibiting residents from using commercial pesticides and other chemicals in the boulevard. These are extremely damaging to trees, pollinators, birds, pets, non-target wildlife. They pollute our soil, air, water. And we recognize that boulevards are different than other city lands like parks. We think they have different uses, and it's okay if these boulevard areas have different standards or regulations than other city lands. Next slide. We recommend not having a blanket 1 meter height limit for plants because once you take into account the planter, this restricts a ton of key foods. Tall plants like tomatoes, peas, those could be out. So we think height could be more of a case-by-case basis, only where there's a clear safety or sightline issue. Next slide. We also support naturalizing ditches by planting native plants. As I mentioned, root systems of native plants absorb more water than grass. So they're actually just more effective in ditches to minimize flooding and reduce erosion. Next slide. So I'll just finish off with the thought that we really need to come back to a way of knowing and relating to the land in a way that recognizes our mutual relationship with nature and our responsibility to protect the land and all species living in it. We really want the bylaw to send the message that plants, trees, edible species, they're all grouped together. They are desirable and not a nuisance or something to be controlled. And so we think this could really be reflected through very positive, encouraging language in the bylaw. So if we go to the next slide, that is everything. We are very excited about these changes, as I mentioned, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Wow, you guys are, I do enjoy your presentations, actually. Graphics are way better for a lot of people than reading, so I appreciate that. Councillor Troster.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. Hi, Erica. Thanks for being here. So, I hope you all can see that your advocacy has made a difference because here we are 2 years later, considering growing food in the Boulevard, which is something that folks asked for that was great. But as you can see, it took some time for the city to get some data. So, I know Councillor Johnson has some suggestions and she has a motion that she'll be bringing forward. Correct? Yes. But, if some of those other things don't, if some of those other asks are not met, are you okay with us maybe waiting on some of those other pieces and if we need to get more data, understanding that this is an evolving process?
I think so. It is definitely an evolving process. I think this is an opportunity to really start thinking about these other changes and these positive steps that we can make. I think we really want to start bringing in trees to these conversations about food planting in the Boulevard. Again, we need a holistic view. We don't want to have these silos where we have only edible plants and then we have only tree planting in the Boulevard. So I think it is an opportunity to start thinking about all of this. If there are different avenues that would be more productive or beneficial to bring forward these items we're looking for, then I think we could be open to those conversations.
Okay, and I'm not going to argue against needing more trees. I have the lowest tree coverage in Centertown of the entire National Capital Region. But do you foresee any challenges with like tree root systems? Should something have to, I don't know, should something have to be dug up or potential damage from snow removal equipment? I think that's where the worry is because root systems are intense, as you know.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think that is actually where having vegetation at the base of trees is really beneficial because it protects those tree root systems better than grass. So when we just have a tree in the Boulevard with grass and we're mowing and weed whacking and plowing, that's where those critical root zones can really get damaged. If we take like a more holistic approach and have like ground cover at the base in the Boulevard, still with the setbacks to allow room for snow plows. And we don't need to do that mowing. We don't need to do that weed whacking. We're actually protecting it. It's better for the tree. So this is why we're trying to bring all these points together.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. I think this is going to be an ever evolving conversation, but I think it's great how much of an impact you've already had. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming out today. And we definitely have a copy of your presentation on the drive for us to look at in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Erica. So we'll move on to Dr. Eugenie Waters, who has now joined us. Hey, Eugenie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking me for the call. Sorry, I'm a little late. Can you hear me okay?
Great. Absolutely. We can hear you. You're no stranger to this place. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to put on two hats. One, I'm representing For Our Kids, which has an Ottawa-Gatineau chapter and is a parent-led network of volunteers taking action for our kids, people's grandchildren, future generations. And the other is For CAPE, which is the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. I'm a member of the Ontario Regional Committee, and CAPE has a long history of working to better human health by protecting the environment. And its founding 30 years ago was actually, started with concerns about, cosmetic pesticides and toxins, toxic exposures to human health. So I'll just get started. I think definitely both of the groups that I'm representing really support this bylaw and the proposed, the improvements that we're hoping to discuss today. And I feel it's really important that this bylaw support ecologically sound community stewardship, a real sense of care for our land, in this case, in the Boulevard across the city. This represents a lot of land, and it's an opportunity for residents to really engage with caring for our communities in a way that's really ecologically sound. And so I think, it's really important that the tone and the language be very much like more permissive, and then only have restrictions where it's really necessary. And I just want to touch on a couple key points. One is that we really hope that this bylaw can allow people to grow plants to their natural height for growing food, for food security, for equity considerations, and just for the joy of gardening, and being able to, for children and people of all ages to be able to enjoy that. You really have to grow plants to their natural height to have a good enough yield. If you think of tomatoes, beans, even kale plants, vegetables that grow on vines like cucumbers and squash, many of them grow taller than a meter. And then if you're adding in the permission to have a raised bed that may be 12 or 18 inches, that restricts people even further. And so, we want people to be able to have that opportunity. And also, I just wanted to point out that, most of the height of these plants that's over a meter or maybe a bit taller if it's in a raised planter box, the height is not coming until, later in the season and for a short period of time, when things are at their maximum growth, kind of in August and September. And so, that's just something to keep in mind. And knowing that the point of the bylaw, obviously it has to be enforceable. You just want people of all ages and abilities to reap the benefits. So that would include people with disabilities, who are going to grow in a raised box. Like why, if they're not able to grow a tomato because they're not growing from the ground level, we really don't want people to be limited. And so I think there's examples that we've seen in Guelph and Kitchener's bylaws where they really talk about interpreting the bylaw in terms of its intent and spirit, and allowing case-by-case exceptions for things to be taller, so long as there's no safety or visibility issues, and that residents aren't unnecessarily penalized. And just on that point, I think I was reading that in Thunder Bay, they use a strategy called planting blocks, where if people want to grow things that are going to be taller, they sort of, the city provides guidance on how to do that so that visibility is maintained. And obviously the city is so heterogeneous, like people's boulevards in Centertown are very different from the boulevards in, Orleans or suburban communities or areas that don't have sidewalks. So I think an across-the-board restriction does not make sense, because people will be able to best assess their local boulevard with a bit of guidance. And, in many areas, people can grow a lot more than you might think in that land. And then speaking to pesticides, I just wanted to comment that, there's lots of commercial pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides that are available over the counter at places like hardware stores, Home Depot, that people can still purchase and use. And I think we need to think of the boulevard as community. This is public land, and we promote organic growing methods in community gardens on city land, for example. We don't allow people to use these products. So I think if we're encouraging people to grow food and have native plants that are good for pollinators in the boulevard, we should have the same restrictions and really be strongly discouraging the use of these products. The root of the word pesticide, insecticide, is situs. That's Latin
Great.
for killing.
Thank you, Eugenie. I should have given you a 10-second warning. We're a little over now, and I got to use the same rules across the board, but I could feel your passion, and I know Councillor Johnson's making notes of these things too, as we're working on something that you may be satisfied with. So thank you for coming out today. I don't see any questions. I really appreciate the passion and coming back online. Thank you for that. Our next, we have two more delegations. One, we have Harry Fisher, Bel Air Community Association. Are they online or in person today? Online, perfect. And there's also a written submission by Harry that is also on our drive for us to look at if we wish to in the future. Hi, Harry. How are you today?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Great. It's a beautiful day out and a good day to talk about flowers. So all that being said, if you're not familiar, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
All right. So my name's Harry Fisher, and this is my first time delegating to committee, but won't be my last. So on behalf of the Bel Air Community Association and the Maitland Area Pollinator Project Group, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to the proposed amendments to the residential boulevard gardening regulations. Despite major climate and environmental changes that are occurring around the world, we're still tending to see boulevards in the right-of-way areas as desirable turf grass areas rather than seeing them as potential environmental growth areas. We could expand greatly our green space if we use it properly. We support the delegations that have already been given before, and we'd like to speak to 4 items. The first one is the proposed plant heights. Considering that the proposed plant height applies from the level of the boulevard, any plants that grow are going to have to only grow like 18, 20 inches, and even common things like peas, tomatoes, beans will not be able to do it. So we support reviewing the height limits in relation to sight of line on the corners. The second item I'd like to speak to is restricting the harmful chemicals, that could be used, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides. Considering the amount of increased rain we're going to get over the next decades due to climate change, all this water is going to wash these chemicals into our waterway. And my point is, if you wouldn't put a chemical into your glass of water to drink when you're sitting at a committee meeting, then why are we allowing those chemicals to get put into our water in the Ottawa River downstream where somebody else is going to be using it for drinking, cooking, and washing? The third item is to regulate the height, not the type of plant in the setbacks. Current law and bylaw says we have to have turf grass around trees, and mandating that leaves it all open to damaging the roots because you're going to be mowing and trimming. These maintenance practices expose the trees to constant injury, and then the trees die and they're of no use to us. Allowing native ground cover plants would help our environment, reduce the maintenance costs of the city, and help prevent damage to city trees. The fourth item I'd like to speak to is to allow planting and naturalization of the ditches and slopes. And this would be quite applicable to Sean Devine's area, because the City View ditches need some attention. Ditches typically now are mowed by the residents, but if you can use deep-rooted perennials and ground covers, it stabilizes the soil better, absorbs more water, and reduces the runoff. In our community, in the Pinecrest Storm Pond, they specifically chose certain plants for that exact purpose, okay, to help absorb water, filter debris. And if we can do that for city property, then we should be allowed to do that on our own property and on the right of way. So we are advocating that residents should be allowed to install sustainable turf grass alternatives in the slopes and in the ditches. And the fourth item is to advocate for planting additional trees in the right of way. Okay, and this one speaks right to Ariel Truster, her area of the city. Okay, in order to provide more shade, reduce runoff, people should be allowed to plant more trees. Okay, might have some regulation to say what and where, but we should be able to have more than one tree. In summary, I like to say that we have the responsibility and privilege to protect, preserve, and improve our environment for future generations. Okay? Our great-grandchildren may either be applauding City Council down the road for forethought and actions, or they may be going and crying that we only kept the status quo. We have an opportunity to take bold steps and work together to align the bylaw with Ottawa's climate, biodiversity, and food security goals, and be at the forefront of making the city more environmentally healthy, or we can hide behind our rules and regulation and do nothing more than the bare minimum. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Great. Hard to believe this is your first time delegating. That was right on time. Very good. We do have a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, and nice to see you, Harry. And I've received several messages from folks, in various departments that are affiliated with Ward 8 that are happy to see you here. So I just wanted to send that out. I wanted to just quickly get you as the MAP group actually did install Boulevard gardens in the Boulevard in Bel Air this last year. So you took advantage of the first set of permissions that had come through this report last year. I was hoping you could describe for the committee what you did.
Well, what we did is we took the Boulevard section between the roadway and the sidewalk for approximately 100 meters. Okay, it's located by the Agincourt Public School, and we said we wanted to have a beautiful garden that all the kids and the parents would walk by and say, hey, this looks much better, is much better for the environment than just turf grass. It was a success. We had a few challenges last year with city snow removal, but we addressed that through staff and through you. And this year, we're happy to say it successfully survived the winter. And we're going to be expanding our planting on those type of boulevards throughout the area again this year.
Thank you for describing that. I just wanted you to bring that story forward because this is iterative, right? We are moving from what was once, a fairly restrictive bylaw to greater and greater permissions. And in my ward, I had community leaders that took advantage of the first set of permissions, put in this pollinator garden, the snow plow, first time they had to do it, damaged it, right? Like And this community was, we all knew that was going to happen to some extent because we're all learning together. And those public works folks, Jake Gravel specifically, who I'd like to mention here, you know, went out and talked with community members about what they could expect and how the snowbanks would be removed and talked to the contractors. And from then on in, you know, we're seeing better and better results. And so I really wanted to take that opportunity with that story to show that there is progress. It is slow. Bless this city. You know, the language in this bylaw might not be, you know, super rosy. I think that, you know, I might be sometimes the rosiest person that talks about the right of way, and that's okay, you know, because we're going to see the community animate these spaces, and that's what it's for. So the city creates the enabling environment. They might not always do it with the biggest, like, you know, twinkle in their eye, but we're doing it. And so I just wanted to say thank you to MAP for that. And thank you for learning with us and being open to learning with us. And I think we're going to get to some even better places today. So thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I'm more of a Venus flytrap person myself, but we'll go with roses. All right. Great. So on that, just before we go to the final delegation, I did want to, I want to thank our amazing bylaw folks sitting here waiting. I know there's an IPD. I don't think anyone's going to hold this, and I should have done that at the beginning. I thought you were just here for me, but that's okay. So we have a memorandum of understanding and letter of agreement between the City of Ottawa and the Public Service Procurement Canada with respects to the 2-block redevelopment project in Kitchissippi Ward. That IPD is there. Is that item carried? Yeah, it's just carried. Carried? No objection? Great. You're free to go on your merry way unless you just want to hang out with me more. That's up to you. Thank you for that. So we'll go on to our final delegation. Apologies. We have Deborah Doherty from Bird Friendly Ottawa.
My apologies. I'm just was rejoining as a delegate. I have, before you actually start the timer, can I get my slides up, please? Thank you.
You're on the screen. Absolutely. As soon as you start talking, we'll begin the 5-minute counter. Please proceed.
Okay. I'm ready. So I'm here this morning representing Bird Friendly Ottawa. And I'd like to thank you for inviting us to participate in this discussion. First off, I'd like to commend city staff for their excellent work and their responsibility on this file and their responsiveness to community input. And in addition to being here as Bird Friendly Ottawa, I'm also working with the Overbrook Community Association with a maintenance agreement with actually the Roads Department for a similar boulevard project to the one that Harry is working on. So I just wanted to mention that. That's at 1 Donald Street in front of the Rideau Sports Center. So actively working to make these kinds of changes within our ward here in Councillor King's ward. So next slide, please. So as many of you are aware, Bird Friendly Ottawa is a partnership of organizations that have been active in bird conservation for years, including the Ottawa Field Naturalists, and I'd like to just highlight a few of those organizations that are very active in encouraging local residents and educating local residents in creating pollinator gardens and wildlife gardens in their yards. So that's very much why we're interested in these changes to the bylaw. Ecology Ottawa has pollinator gardens and tree seedings. Fletcher Wildlife Garden has been for over 20 years, has been encouraging citizens to create shared spaces for wildlife in their yards. And we're in full support of the recommendations that have been presented by my colleagues previously. Next slide, please. So why? There's been a huge decline in bird populations, and many of you will be familiar with the phrase, the canary in the coal mine. The birds are warning us that we have huge climate change ahead, and we've lost 3 billion birds over the last 50 years in North America. So it's time to pay attention. It's time to act. And I'm so excited about these changes that are allowing the community to invest in making our city a more bird-friendly city. Next slide, please. So this year we're on the eve of World Migratory Bird Day, which is an international event, and I'm pleased to say that Councillor Kavanaugh will be joining us and hosting an event in her ward to celebrate World Migratory Bird Day. But we're really looking at 7 simple actions, and today I'd like to focus on 2 of those, which are planting more plants and native trees, and protecting insects and avoiding using pesticides. So in some, more trees provide more habitat and provide food. Insects are absolutely critical to the survival of birds. Over 90% of birds use insects to feed themselves and their young. And so we're asking that we really look at having the residents need to comply with applying pesticides and chemicals on the right of way to protect our birds and to protect our humans. And as Harry mentioned, to protect our water systems, because there's indications that not just insectivores, but also our water shorebirds are being affected by when rodenticides enter the water system, and of course our raptors. And I will conclude with that. I'm feeling a little bit rushed, and I just open for any questions.
Great. Thank you for that. And thanks for coming out. We've also put in the presentation up on our drive for future review. Seeing no questions, thank you for that. At this point, we're finished with delegations, but I'm going to ask Councillor Johnson, that's been working very actively on this file, along with others, including Councillor Devine and Troster. I think everyone around the table are kind of excited about this one. Lainey, maybe you want to go ahead and read out the direction or motion to staff here on this one.
Thank you. So this motion covers the allowing turf grass alternatives in the boulevard. So whereas the use and care of roads bylaw number 2003-498 places an obligation on the owner of the land zoned residential to cut the grass and weeds on the boulevard abutting the owner's land. And whereas the bylaw also prohibits the digging up and removal of grass within a boulevard. And whereas the use and care of roads bylaw was amended in 2023 to permit residents to replace the grass in a boulevard abutting the property with a garden, subject to parameters including setbacks from existing city and utility infrastructure as well as trees. Whereas these amendments were done in part to recognize the environmental benefits of allowing alternatives to grass within the boulevard while maintaining safe mobility and the continuances of city and utility operations within the right of way. Whereas there are other landscaping alternatives to grass within a boulevard that would require less maintenance by abutting owners, provide environmental benefits, and would not impact city or utility operations or mobility within the right of way. And whereas there are other landscaping alternatives to grass within a boulevard that requires less maintenance by abutting owners, provide environmental benefits, and would not impact city or utility operations or mobility within the right of way. Therefore, be it resolved that Public Works and Infrastructure Committee recommend council approve amendments to the use and care of roads bylaw number 2003-4982 to permit the owners of land zoned residential to replace the grass within the boulevard abutting the property with herbaceous ground cover defined as soft stem plants that grow to a mature height not exceeding 20 centimeters and which die down to the root every year, and not including any of the species listed in Schedule 8 of the bylaw being the species prohibited within the city's right-of-way. And B, require the owners of land zone residential to cut the herbaceous ground cover as part of an owner's existing obligation to cut the grass and weeds on the abutting boulevard. So just to quickly introduce this one. So I come at this from a place of maintenance. I personally have zero green thumb, even though we've heard from many that do. And anything that I can do that requires less maintenance is of interest to me. And I think there is also just, a general understanding that we are evolving our land use planning priorities and that alternatives to grass are becoming more and more common to support all the reasons that delegates have put forward. So in working with staff and with consultation with the fire chief, this was an amendment that was a win for everybody, essentially. And certainly we can discuss it. I'm happy to. And then I have some questions for staff on the fuller report. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been so passionate on this one and educated us all so much. I don't even see any hands up at this point. So I'll leave it to you unless you have questions to staff, to wrap up and we can carry this item.
Oh, okay, sure. So, okay, so I'll just keep going on the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very good. So I think you can see that I've been somewhat tasked by the group to advance priorities that are actually shared by many councillors. And I'd like to specifically mention, hello, Ariel. Yes, would you like to jump?
Sorry about that. Instead of that, did you want to go ahead?
No, my questions were on the general piece, not on Lane's motion. We were about to wrap on the general piece?
Yeah, this is all in one.
Okay, I'm just wondering if staff could talk to me more about why trees are not currently permitted in this update for the bylaw in the boulevard.
Yeah, Chair, as we've heard much about trees from the delegates and to the councillor's question, I think it's important to distinguish in terms of what's being permitted here. It's not a question of concerns with respect to trees within the boulevard. It's a question of who is planting those trees within the boulevard. Given some of the concerns, for example, around root systems that were raised, there are underground utilities that need to be accounted for. And when it comes to the planting of trees, these generally require larger mechanisms or mechanical equipment to affect that. So there is a risk of damage to underground utilities such as gas, electrical, and telecom. Similarly, when the city undertakes its tree planting program, that effort is coordinated with the works of other projects going on in the city, like capital projects, as well as other utility work. So again, it's not a question of not wanting to see trees within the boulevard. It's a question of making sure that those are coordinated and done by staff through the programs that exist already.
Okay, so just to be clear, if a resident wants a tree in their boulevard, what do? They contact the city and they ask for one.
Chair, I'm going to defer that question over to my colleagues in forestry to answer.
Okay, I'm just wondering I just want to clarify what the process is. A trees and trust program, I assume.
Yes, thank you. Through your chair. So the city does have programs to plant trees in the right of way. The most popular one is Trees and Trust, and that is if a resident wants a tree planted in the right of way, they can call the city and we will do a site inspection and get them scheduled in if it's an appropriate location for trees. I will say that through our work with the tree planting strategy, we are beginning to roll out a proactive approach to right-of-way tree replacements. So the resident under that program will no longer have to request the tree. If a tree is removed, it will automatically be assessed for replanting and scheduled with communications with the resident for planting in our next available planting season. So there'll be information coming out later this spring on how we're going to roll out that program around the city.
That's great. I appreciate that. And one of the challenges in Centertown is we have a lot of rental properties. So, I know our own greening committees on our community associations have identified all sorts of locations, but sometimes it's abutting private property on a rental property. So it's hard to reach the landlord. Are there any strategies you've thought of or are working on to deal with that?
Yeah, so through our work with the tree planting strategy as well, we'll be looking at what are those challenges. So once our priority areas have been identified for tree planting, we'll be going into those areas and looking at what are the opportunities for tree planting, what are the barriers to tree planting, is planting needed on private property, is planting needed on city property, how do we contact those property owners where they're rental properties to encourage them to plant trees on their own property, or we can plant on the right of way in front of those properties. We're just rolling out our Plant Your Place program, as you're aware. It'll be launching on Monday, and that is for private land tree planting. So that is really bolstering all of our tree planting programs so that we have something available for the right of way, but we also have offerings for private land as well.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the clarification, especially because we certainly need more trees in Centertown. But it's good to know that there's nothing, this bylaw doesn't prevent those trees from being planted. They just need to be planted by the city.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Trotzer. Councillor Judas.
Thank you, Chair. I know you had referenced that there's utilities under a lot of this property and that'll be part of the work to educate the community. Oftentimes these utilities come into my community or go across the city and folks forget what section of the roadway is theirs, what part of the boulevard's theirs. They are, rightfully so. They feel that their own property has been intruded upon. And sometimes these utilities will take up quite a lot of space, not even on public land, but also on their private. So this is a constant thing every year that myself, my community, I'm sure other colleagues are going through. This is a wonderful improvement, but this adds another element to that confusion, that question, and the ongoing need for education. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to be informing residents about how that works, particularly when it comes to the more solid, say, gardening, I can't remember the word, sorry, containers. How does that work if a utility comes in? What if they break it? What happens? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's two elements of the education here. One is to educate residents on how that interaction works with the utilities, but the other two is to educate the utilities on how to properly approach these sorts of situations, respecting that they have a right to access, install their plant. They do require permits and approvals from the city. And what we look to is, we've talked at this committee before about road cut permits and those permits to excavate that are required by anybody. And as part of that, under the road activity bylaw, there's a notice that is required to be sent to all residents beside and near the work and where it's occurring. And the intent of that notice, in part, in situations such as this, would be to help residents have some forewarning of work that's coming so that they could try and remove their containers, or if unfortunately plants are to be in the path of where a utility needs to excavate, they could take out those plantings to later put back. And a lot of it is connecting the utility owner. To use Bell, for instance, we have relationships with the construction companies as well as Bell's operations itself to encourage them to have those conversations with homeowners before they go and do the work, to look at what Bell could do, for example, as a utility coming through, to be less impactful or to work with residents to help them move their things. That's not to say necessarily there's an obligation, but we try and encourage those relationships through that. When it comes to educating the residents, that's where we'll look to leverage our ottawa.ca page. We have general information there already on what to understand when you see locate flags go up, when you receive a notice with respect to work being done under a road cut permit, and we'll need to make those messages clear. And certainly with councillors as well, we can work through your offices to deliver those messages to help people understand what they may see in their neighborhood with respect to upcoming work and what that might mean for anything that they have. But it is, I'll say, a risk that they face in doing so within the right of way, given the other actors that live there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know you've put a lot of thought into it. I have had a lot of situations working with utilities where some are great and communicative with the community and myself, and then other times where it's not been the case. So I would definitely want to keep the information/education piece in the realm of the city as the primary. I do appreciate that ottawa.ca is available. Not everybody will go and look there before they go to plant on their boulevard. So certainly I would highly recommend, I actually, Chair, I have a direction that I put together about this. I'm sorry, I didn't circulate it, and I'm happy to bring it back after so I can send it.
That's fine. We have time between now and council. If it doesn't, we can
Perfect.
figure it out.
And it's literally just to ask for that kind of, focused communication and to include the utility piece. So I can share it before council if you
Sure,
want.
let's work on the verbiage before then, and
Certainly.
I see heads nodding, so I don't see a real
Yeah,
issue
it's
with
just,
that.
I don't want anybody saying I didn't know.
Hmm.
Or if they didn't know, we can point to something saying, okay, but here's the information. Because residents have once again, they deserve that kind of foresight in terms of what the impact to their new garden will be. So one more final comment, how far we have come. When we first started looking at gardening on the right of way, and I know I worked really closely with Councillor King and so many of you around the table and on council, it was you guys were rightfully so concerned. Bylaw was concerned about how do we ensure that people know what's right and what's wrong and how to do this, sightlines, liability, road salt, like all the nuances. And now we're here at a place where we get to see, a phenomenal innovative use of our right of ways. So I'm really excited about that. And I have suspicions that there'll be more to come. So be warned, be warned. Anyway, thank you so much. You're an amazing team.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of the delegations, or maybe more than that, mentioned pesticides. And I was wondering if staff can have information on what the current rules are. So I thought there were some provincial restrictions already on pesticide use.
Yeah, Chair, there is a provincial cosmetic use pesticide act that speaks to a ban on the use and sale of cosmetic use pesticides. But when it comes to what the city may have, I'd have to suggest that we would get back to this committee before council. But that's the provincial legislation that's in play to regulate that field.
And I would also think that be outside of the realm of right of way to regulate. Like, I don't know what department would regulate that, but it seems out of scope for your department. Is that right?
Chair, I would concur with the councillor's statement. And I think when we look at that too, there needs to be a question of both the strategy and the perspective, be it just not the right of way, but also city property in generally. So this would be beyond the scope of right of way regulation, as you suggest.
Does that mean if we were to consider our own rules around pesticide use, you'd want to have it not just for boulevards, but for parks, to have a consistent rule for all public land and not just boulevards? Is that what you're getting at?
I'd suggest that that's something that would need to be looked at as part of how this would go forward, giving due consideration to all of the elements that may come into play. I'm not suggesting that would be the way to go, but it would be something that in figuring out what the way to go would be, we'd need to consider.
Okay, thanks. So perhaps colleagues who are on Environment Committee, that might be a more appropriate spot for that discussion. Thanks, Chair.
Good point. Thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to first, similar to Councillor Dudas, appreciate or provide my appreciation for progress that we've been making. Residents in my ward are very keen to get going. Many have already done so. But now that we have a framework in place, this will certainly guide folks who have been doing it already, but also those who have been waiting for permission to get going. So very well received for all the reasons that you provided in your introduction. Hopefully Ottawa will be leading the way and other municipalities will take our lead to permit this as well. So thank you. Just a few questions. In your presentation, you talked about the height of planters. You gave 3 different dimensions, 45 centimeters, a meter, 75 centimeters. Just talk me through this so I understand. If someone has a raised bed, what dimension are we talking about for the height of that planter, but also the height of the plants or vegetables growing in that planter?
Yeah, Chair, I think it's worth first noting that as was established in the previous round where the rules for Boulevard Gardens were carried, that there is an overarching height limit of 1 meter outside of a corner side triangle where that is reduced to 0.75 meters. That is the benchmark, irrespective of whether your plantings are in the ground or in a raised bed or in a container. And to speak a little bit about the rationale behind that, when we look at safety being a key factor that we're trying to balance in bringing forward these amendments. When we look at driver height, the average driver height is around 1.0, I know I say around and I give a very specific number, 1.08 meters. So that ensures that when people are backing out of their driveways, that they can see over the garden in order to be aware of any pedestrians that might be walking, any cyclists that might be coming by, as well as other vehicular traffic. So within that 1 meter threshold, a raised bed, we're recommending have a maximum height of 45 centimeters. The rationale for that being it provides enough depth for root-based vegetables, but does not sort of, I'll say, provide for a larger raised bed that may be more difficult to disassemble and move should there be the need due to utility work or a capital project coming through. So we feel with that recommendation, it strikes the balance. When it comes to containers, there's not necessarily a height other than that overall 1, because again, the intent would be by definition, they're readily movable. So that would need to be factored in.
Okay, that's much more helpful for me, a better understanding. With respect to proactive communications, you talked about partnering with Ottawa Public Health on a brochure or some sort of comms with respect to it. You know, I'm paraphrasing, but I heard basically food safety matters with OPH, and that makes sense from their perspective. But a detailed outline of the parameters or the framework, including, you know, heights, the setbacks from the curb or the sidewalk. There should be a one-stop document. I don't want to see one document from OPH and another document from the city. Let's put it all in one. So can you just talk to that? That's the intent or not?
Certainly, Chair, and I'll just say simply that's the intent. So the website would, and to the councillor's point, what we want to do is be clear in the regulations. We want them to be simple to follow, and this is why we've avoided, for example, a permitting system as a recommendation, because we want it to be something that everybody understands. So with that intent in mind as well, and I think you alluded to it, councillor, we're looking at how we can represent graphically all of these different things so that people understand, and all of the advice on the topic would be collated in one-stop shop, so to speak.
Finally, Chair, despite overwhelming support from my residents, I did receive one email of opposition, and I think the grounds for their opposition is sufficient for me to raise today because I think the question needs to be asked. How will we determine what is an unkept or unsightly garden versus something that is well kept and sort of in tune with the community itself? Will bylaw have to be somewhat subjective? How is that going to be enforced?
Chair, I'm going to defer to my colleague who stuck around just for a question like this.
Morning. Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, discretion obviously is always within our purview. What I can say based on the changes a couple of years ago that were passed through this committee to today, we've only had approximately 15 calls per year. So I'd imagine it'll be in line with that. In terms of, yes, it is our discretion. We will review based on the current regulations to see if there's any changes or parameters. And if we do think it creeps past that acceptable level, then absolutely we will take enforcement actions. And it doesn't mean we're coming in with lawnmowers and things necessarily, but it is, you know, through verbal warning and continuing work with the property owners to bring it into compliance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's where with good communications, proactive communications at the beginning, the brochure that has everything outlined on one, reinforcements by councillors within their local communities, we can avoid that. I don't think every front lawn in the city of Ottawa is going to participate in this program. I think this is somewhat focused to those who have been advocating for this. But for those who will be engaged in this process, I do envision yards that will be kept well and people who want to participate and grow their own food. So I think this is very good. I highly support this. And even though I'm not on this committee, I will be voting for this when it comes to council.
I know I broke my own rules. I was supposed to go to committee members first. So thank you for keeping it so succinct. I'll go to Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Short and sweet for me, I just wanted to thank you for your good work on this. This is innovative. I think a really good example of the city listening. And, we heard that people wanted this opportunity and you've answered that call. I have my own veggie garden that I labor over and appreciating that I'm in a rural area with more space. I'm glad that more people are going to get that opportunity. I have similar, I guess, concerns that some of my colleagues share just about the conflicts between, public works and contractors and a potential for property standards issue. But Jennifer, I'm really encouraged by those stats. And I look forward to the motion that Councillor Dudas is going to bring forward. But, you seem to have everything well in hand. And I'm very encouraged by how this is rolled out. So just a thank you from me.
Great. And just to get the language on the screen, Councillor Dudas, I think you're highlighting what a lot of us are thinking as councillors on the other end of the phone that have to deal with the issues after the fact. So Councillor Dudas, you got some direction to staff here. If you can go ahead and read that, please.
Thank you. That as part of the amendments to the residential boulevard gardening regulations, staff be directed to develop a comprehensive communications and outreach plan to inform residents about the new City of Ottawa bylaws. This plan should clearly outline potential risks or impacts to gardens within the city right of way, including those related to utility work, snow clearing, and city maintenance.
Thank you very much for that. We'll go back to again, is that received? Yeah, and we can hash out semantics before the meeting. That's why I like to do these things in advance so we can work these out, but we'll clear it up before council. Vice Chair Kitts, apologies. Oh, you're still on the board? Okay. Councillor Devon.
Thank you, Chair. So it's already been said, but thank you very much to staff for working so hard on this. And I really do genuinely look forward to what I expect I will see, on boulevards and lawns across the city over the next few seasons. And I really do want to thank my colleague, Councillor Johnson, not just for the amendment that was brought today, but for the work that I think will be coming forward over the next few months to seek other refinements outside of the scope of here. But also to thank Councillor Johnson for one thing that I know that she does very well among many of us, which is, as I hear her say oftentimes, listening to the wisdom in the room. And the wisdom in the room was the community that spoke really clearly about the kind of change that we want to see in Ottawa. And not only am I happy, and this kind of speaks to what bylaw was saying about using discretion. So not only am I happy by what I'm going to see tangibly on lawns, but I'm happy to see what this refers to as an adoption to be innovative in Ottawa and an adoption to embrace a different culture of what can pass as a new normal in Ottawa. And I only hope that when bylaw uses their discretion, they evolve that discretion to reflect the changing wisdom in the city. Another thing that so I, like Councillor Johnson, received many, many inquiries, but can we modify this too? Can we modify that too? And as Rob and I were addressing, not all of those things fall within the scope here, but I know that they will fall within the scope of some other opportunities coming up. And to speak specifically, for example, to the use of pesticides, I think that will come to committee. But one thing that I have understood and learned is that, for example, already within Canada, we are very restrictive on the kinds of pesticides that can be used. And so we already have policies in place to address what might be some of the concerns of these residents. There are substances you can buy at Home Depot in the US that you can't buy here. There are noxious chemicals that, God forbid, they allow happen down there, but we don't allow here. And so already the city has recognized what some of these concerns are, and I'm sure we'll continue to do better. But thank you to staff, thank you to bylaw for the change that I know you will embrace, and thanks to Councillor Johnson, and especially thank you to the community for their wisdom.
Great point. And with tariffs, don't buy anything from the States right now. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So just to wrap up, we were sort of discussing the broader report as well as whether there were any questions on the motion. I'm going to assume that there wasn't so much any questions on the motion that I could bring forward, but I guess, I think it would be important, as you said, to recognize that Ottawa is moving forward. I'm not sure that we would be considered a leader. I think there are certainly other cities that we are still lagging, and that is what the community is bringing forward in terms of, you know, examples from other municipalities. And so I think, given that we want to respect the scope of this committee, and redirect some of those other inquiries to other places, I just wanted to outline where we're going to do that, or where my office and other offices are planning to do that. Certainly I was glad to see Tracy here. So Tracy in forestry doing the tree planting strategy, you know, we'll certainly be following up with that team to talk about both the type of trees in terms of species and the planting regulations, and the further care and maintenance of those trees over time when they are planted on city property, I think remains a concern. So certainly following up there throughout the spring. My colleague to my left here initiated a ditch alteration sponsors group. We have our second meeting after this meeting this afternoon, and I've heard from my rural colleagues as well that they're very interested in growing larger plants in the ditch. One of the concerns that we've had in City View, we're doing a ditch rehabilitation project. We're going to be digging up everyone's ditches. How are we not going to repeat this mistake again? Well, maybe by removing some of those maintenance requirements from residents and planting things that require less attention, we can preserve the integrity of that ditch over time. But again, that's not so much here. And then the plant heights. I think that there is a willingness from the community certainly to continue the conversation, but I'm respecting staff's work, you know, bringing this report back 2 times now. Is there a commitment that you can make to residents when looking at, you know, things like plant heights and other sort of practicalities or limitations in the bylaw that emerge over a growing season? Could you make a commitment here to the community on that?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Appreciating what we've heard today and recognize that this is an evolutionary process, that it's based on lived experience, and it is somewhat new for us. Coming out of the growing season in the fall, staff could certainly commit to meeting with all of the delegates here today, as well as those we've engaged with previously on this work, to talk about what's working, what's not from their perspective, and looking at where we would be going forward on all of this.
Thank you very much for that commitment. I know that's important to the group, and certainly again with the MAP group in Bel Air, it was only after planting the thing and plowing the thing that we could make those adjustments, right? So I do think it's practical to allow the thing to evolve over one season. So that being said, I think what I'm really noticing through this process is something that Councillor Carr has brought up, and something that I look forward to working with Marty on, is that green initiatives really do cross a lot of departments, but the people who care about them remain the same, and they have to do an awful lot of running around to try and figure out where to put their feedback. And so how we might be able to, as a city, bring some type of holistic umbrella, some kind of oversight or central point for these green initiatives, I think would be really helpful, both for those councillors and residents that are interested, but also for staff who are being asked to consider, you know, aspects of this work that is a bit beyond, you know, what you might have imagined to become an expert in at any given time. So I appreciate everyone's work on that, and thank you, Chair, for the time.
Great, and thank you for your tremendous work on this file. As amended, is that carried? And on the actual motion itself, is that carried? I've done everything right, Kelly? Good, you're keeping me in line. On to the next item on the agenda, we do have 4 delegations. This is the motion that Councillor Kitts has read in regards to the multi-use pathway along the airport parkway. So the first delegation is Terry Wood. Is Terry in the room by chance? Okay, we don't see Terry on deck at this point, but we'll look out for him as we go through the remaining delegations. Our second delegation is William Van Geest. Is William online? Hi, William. You're no stranger to this venue, so you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you can hear me okay?
No problem.
Great. Great, thank you. So thank you, for the opportunity to address you. So I remember being at this committee 2 years ago, speaking to the same project and kicking myself. This body at that time, called the Transportation Committee, of course, was considering the projects in the 2023 budget, of which this was one. I was noticing how much public support there was for the active transportation components and how much opposition to the widening, and then how obvious the decision to decouple the two, that I thought my time was wasted. I should have spent my time opposing the other problematic project on the budget, the $22 million Earl Grey underpass. And sure enough, this committee made the easy decision to decouple the active transportation components of the project from the Parkway widening. And unfortunately, the Earl Grey underpass passed without comment. So I'm a little surprised to be back here arguing against the recoupling of the active transportation components with the widening. I'm also aware that council typically doesn't revisit past decisions unless they're egregious or circumstances have changed, although sometimes a new council will revisit a former council's decisions. But the decision to this motion seeks to reverse was this council's and this committee's. I'd like to quickly review why decoupling the active transportation components and the widening was so obvious a decision. First, the active transportation components are needed immediately. As for the multi-use path, the motion points out that there's already a MUP on the east side of the Parkway, but that means nothing to the Riverside Park or Hunt Club communities, for whom accessing that MUP means crossing the Parkway or a 10-minute detour. The Transportation Master Plan commits to providing, quote, safe, comfortable, direct, and connected cycling facilities and routes. Currently, there is no facility west of the Parkway. The project also includes a protected intersection at Walkley and McCarthy, McCarthy being the only route between Riverside Park and Hunt Club. So this is critical too. Similarly, the complete streets elements planned for Walkley are well needed, given it's 4 car lanes wide with no cycling facilities, even though in the TMP, it's a crosstown bikeway. The Parkway widening, by contrast, is not needed, or at very best, any need is unclear at this time. Just over a year ago, I myself went out to the Airport Parkway during rush hour to see how bad the traffic was. I counted 22 cars per minute. The previous year, I'd counted 18 cars per minute, and this was before the Trillium line was open. Which brings me to the next point. The LRT's Trillium line, which fully opened a couple weeks ago, runs immediately parallel to the Parkway. The motion this committee passed in 2023 delays the widening, quote, to allow for ridership on the expanded Trillium line to establish. This satisfied the Transportation Master Plan, which commits to, quote, avoid adding new road or highway capacity that competes with rapid transit. If we're going to spend $1.6 billion for transportation infrastructure, we should at least give it a chance to attract riders. Finally, induce demand. Research shows that when we widen roads, we get more cars. When we create active transportation facilities, we get more active transportation users. If we widen the Parkway, where will these cars go? I'm not sure we need more traffic congestion in Ottawa. The motion this committee passed in 2023 makes good sense. Give the Trillium line 2 years to attract riders and then revisit the plan to widen the Parkway. A widening isn't needed now, and I suspect it won't be needed then. In the meantime, create safe conditions for people biking, walking, and rolling in and around the Riverside Park and Hunt Club communities. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation. Councillor Bradley.
Thanks, William, for coming out to delegate today. I much appreciate the comments that you're making and agree with many of them, and I'll be raising some of them in my comments on this item as well. I did want to point out that I had asked the clerk's office as well if this would be reconsideration, given that committee had just made a decision to decouple this project in 2023 and was told that the new information of the $857,000 throwaway cost made it not reconsideration. Now, I would also disagree with that, just in that we identified that there would be some challenges in constructing a MUP in advance of a potential future road widening. So it's a bit of a stretch for me, but I wanted to let you know that I did ask that question.
Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you for that. We'll go back to see no further questions. Thank you, William. We do see Terry Wood online. Hey, Terry, how are you today? If you're not
thank you very much.
You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to address you today. I'm a resident of Riverside Park, but today I'm speaking on behalf of the Riverside Park Community Association and also the Ridgemont Community Association. Together, we represent the areas directly to the west, south, and southeast of the Airport Parkway, north of the Hydro Rail Corridor. These communities are directly adjacent to much of the of the new MUP. So we'd like to register 3 points really in relation to the proposed motion and the new MUP more generally. First point is we strongly support the motion and the recommendation that construction of the new MUP along the west side of the Airport Parkway be deferred and considered at the time when a final decision is made on the widening of the parkway. So we'd want to thank Councillors Kitt and Brockington for bringing forward this motion, and also to city staff for their efforts to avoid the unnecessary expenditure of $870,000 of scarce taxpayer money, which would be needed to repair the new MUP when the parkway itself is widened. That $870,000 is about 20% of the initial $4.5 million construction cost of the new MUP. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So on this first point, we want to emphasize that every effort always needs to be made to avoid unnecessary waste or duplication of scarce taxpayer money. This brings us to our second point, which is that the new West Side MUP is questionable overall in terms of its need, value, and environmental impact, and therefore should be revisited in its entirety. As Councillor Kitt's motion notes in its last preambular paragraph, there already is an existing MUP on the east side of the Airport Parkway that, quote, provides a safe mobility option for pedestrians and cyclists along this corridor, unquote. This existing MUP is part of the Sawmill Creek Pathway, which is a designated cycling spine route and a major pathway to which improved connectivity to West Walkley Road is being planned by several city active transportation projects that complement various aspects of the widening of the Airport Parkway. The other aspect to take into consideration of the new MUP is its impact on green space. To do the new MUP requires a strip of land up to 15 meters wide for over 2 kilometers between Brookfield Road and Hunt Club. So this is a not insignificant amount of green space, and using this green space contradicts no less than 5 existing city policies about the environment, the protection of green space, preservation of forest cover, and things of that nature. Those specific policies are outlined in my written brief. So the second point, overall, the new MUP provides marginal additional value. It's hard to believe that the city is going to spend $4.5 million of taxpayer money to duplicate a MUP that already exists on the east side of the parkway. Think how many active transportation projects that funding could benefit. So it's really a questionable use of money overall. My third and last point is that as part of the Airport Parkway widening, there is this package that has been agreed in Budget 2023 that involves the construction of the new off-ramp from the Parkway onto West Walkley Road prior to the time the Parkway is widened. This new exit ramp is going to put much incremental traffic onto West Walkley Road. There are measures planned, traffic calming measures planned for Walkley Road that will deal with the incremental traffic. In our view, the overarching priority needs to be on implementing these new traffic calming and safety measures on West Walkley Road to deal with the incremental traffic coming from the new off-ramp. That should be the priority, as well as improving the connectivity of the existing MUP to West Walkley Road.
For example, there is a project underway. The
Great.
city is
Thanks,
planning.
Ms. Wood. If I'll give you 10 seconds to wrap up.
Okay.
Good.
So those are the 3 points. Those, in our view, should be the priority.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for contributing to the conversation today. Seeing no questions, thank you for that. Next delegation is Matthew Pinder. While we wait to see if Matthew comes online, we'll go ahead to Florence Lehman. There, I see Florence's bicycle icon. So now we just need to see a face, if you wish. There you go. Hey, Florence.
Apology. So good morning. Yes, it's still morning. My name is Florence Lehmann, and I'm the president of ByTown. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As was pointed out by a previous speaker, on March 1st, 2023, City Council approved the deferral of the Parkway widening and the funding of non-widening aspects of the project, including a multi-use pathway. While this was a laudable decision, here we are 2 years later talking yet again about making an active mobility project contingent on car infrastructure. While it's normal to consider building or widening roads as standalone projects, it's considered wasting money to build active mobility infrastructure on its own, double standard and motor normativity at its best. Now imagine as well if someone said, sorry, you can only have one car lane going south. There's already a road going the other direction on the other side of South Keys. Drivers have many options. People biking, walking, or rolling don't. They must be content with a few options available to them. The Trillium line has only been operational for a few weeks. What does it mean for the map to the west side of the pathway? That its construction would be delayed by how many years? If this motion is approved, what year will we see the routes, these routes open for people on bikes? 27, 29? That's too late. One must not forget that making it safer, easier, and more comfortable for people to walk and bike to the O-train stations will also help to achieve the ridership the city is seeking for the O-train and its overall modal shift goals. Without these changes, there are serious gaps in access to cycling infrastructure, notably a gap between Sawmill Creek multi-use pathway and Walkley Road and O-train station. Currently, access is limited to a small elevator, which means people biking on adaptive bikes, cargo bikes, a bike with a trailer, or with small children who can't be left unaccompanied are not able to move between these locations safely. Last but not least, the airport parkway shouldn't be widened, period. First, there is a train running right beside it that the city has invested a lot of money in already. Second, widening roads only provides temporary relief from congestion due to induced demand, which has been touched upon by a previous speaker. Third, the city has set objectives to make a majority of trips made by sustainable modes of transportation by 2046. This requires funding and building transit, cycling, walking, but not expanding existing car infrastructure. ByTown and our members ask that councillors support building these amenities for people walking and cycling as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Don't leave us yet, Florence. You have a question from Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Florence, for coming out today. Do you think there's any chance this would be built if it was delayed? My concern is that it won't be. That delay means, never.
There is a chance. I mean, at this point, it's always about the chicken and the egg. Don't build it, you won't get more people shifting to cycling as a mode of transportation. we keep delaying projects for that are related to active transportation. So yes, at this point, given what we're hearing, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen for all model modes in that area. So yes, concerned about that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, the irony is about widening a road to the airport when we've just built a train to go out there. And it's fully functioning. So I appreciate you mentioning that we do have service out there, and yet we're widening the road ahead of a multi-use path. So I appreciate your intervention, and thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Brockington has a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Lehman, for your delegation. First of all, I just want to say Council has approved the construction of the MUP. A motion was passed by City Council to advance the off-ramp project, which includes a number of projects, including the MUP. So that's been approved by Council. The dilemma or the question that this committee and Council is facing now is if the MUP is built in 2027. It's in final design now, 2 years of construction, 2026, 2027. And the city studies the need to widen the airport parkway 2 years after the Trillium line opened, because that's the wording of the motion. So that's also in 2027. And if it's determined that the widening project will go ahead, that means in less than 2 years, the MUP, which will have just been built, would have to be closed. And as staff point out, will be damaged by the construction, and we need to spend probably at that point $1 million. So my question to you is, do you still believe that the city should go ahead and build them up, which in less than 2 years is going to be closed for potentially up to 2 years and damaged, or just wait potentially a few years later and do it all at once? So we're all on board for the MUP. We strongly support the need for more active transportation. The question is, do you build it now and have to spend an additional $1 million of taxpayer money, or wait and do it at that point?
A couple of things come to mind. When there's construction in a given area, the city has no qualms about building a temporary road, whatever the technical would be, just to bypass that, to be able to allow motorized traffic to go through. Now, what I'd like the city to consider in this particular area is the multimodal aspect of the area. What I'm talking about is constructing the MUP as soon as possible, while at the same time not actually widening the parkway. We have a train running next to the parkway, and we want to increase ridership. So what are we trying to do? If we widen the parkway, we'll increase more we'll encourage more people to drive, fewer people to take the train. So what is it we're trying to achieve? This only delays the goals the city has to make more sustainable, the majority of sustainable trips by sustainable modes of transportation. So I think it's not just about the pathway, it's about facilitating the adoption of other non-single occupancy vehicle traffic, if I may say. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I appreciate your delegation today. And Chair, I'll just say again that Council directed staff to put the widening on hold to measure the success of the Trillium line for 2 years, 2 full years. Staff will measure the ridership, trying to attract new people to get off the parkway. And only after those 2 years will Council make a final decision on whether the widening proceeds or not. This was identified in 2013, Chair, by Council as a project. We have not been in a rush to widen the airport parkway, and I've been part of that since 2014. So anyway, I appreciate the delegation. Certainly the benefits of active transportation and the priority of active transportation is very important. And we'll get into debate on the motion in just a few minutes. So thanks, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that.
Councillor Brockington, may I add something?
Actually, Florence, forgive me. We've concluded the delegation on this one, but certainly can provide written response. And I think we also have listened intently on what you've said. I have to have the same rules for everybody, unfortunately. So, but thank you for participating today. Matthew Pinder did not arrive, but there is correspondence that's available on the drive. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor to questions to staff, committee members first, then others, and then we'll go to a wrap up by Vice Chair Kitts and myself, and then we'll vote. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I had lovely notes written, but my computer's been crashing all day. So I've got some scrambled jotted notes that I'll try to do my best to articulate my view on this. But first, I wanted to thank my colleague, Councillor Brockington. This does fall within his community, but being close neighbors, this MUP serves the residents of Gloucester Southgate as well, which is why I've taken a particular interest. And I want to thank my colleagues back in 2023 for recognizing that, you know, we're in a bit of a different landscape now than we were when we had first envisioned the widening of the Airport Parkway, where we had a brand new Trillium line running parallel to the road that was going to be opening, and that it was prudent upon us to study how that would impact travel patterns, recognizing though that we still very much needed the Walkley off-ramp and we very much needed the multi-use pathway. I don't think we're arguing today whether there's value in the MUP, it's timing. And what I would say, because I have been around City Hall for a long time and participated in the very early discussions about the Airport Parkway widening, that when we did our last update to the TMP in 2013, this project was scheduled to be done, completed. We'd be driving on it today in 2019. And that didn't happen. So we wouldn't be having this conversation if we were able to deliver on the projects in the TMP in the timeframe in which we thought we could. And that didn't happen because we didn't collect enough development charges to fund this project. So it had nothing to do with any community resistance to widening the Airport Parkway or political resistance to widening the Airport Parkway. It legitimately was we did not have the funding in place to widen it. And so now we're here today having the conversation about whether or not we should move forward with the MUP now or couple it again with the Airport Parkway. And I have to say, I'm urging everybody to recognize that there is no guarantee that when we reassess the Airport Parkway in 2027, that we're going to be mobilizing on that project in 2027. It could very much be another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years before we have adequate funding in our budgets, we collect enough DCs to move forward. So we're not just delaying this project by 2 years. This could be delayed by a decade. We wouldn't have a multi-use pathway for a decade because we're waiting for funding to accrue for the Parkway. So it's not just a little bit of a delay. I know Councillor Brockington had mentioned we'll reassess in 2027. I have no doubt that the need for the widening will still be there, that staff will say that it's needed, but that doesn't mean we execute on it right then and there. And I think the fact that this was supposed to be done in 2019 should be a very clear example that this project was delayed by no fault of anybody's, just the collection of DCs. And the project is only going to continue to escalate in cost. So we're worried about the throwaway cost, but there's a cost of opportunity of not doing this now too. We're seeing construction escalation, particularly with the addition of tariffs. And of course we have inflation. So if this project doesn't get done in the next decade, guess what? It's going to cost us a lot more than the $4.5 million price tag, and probably a lot more than what we're considering to be the $870,000 of throwaway costs. So I urge you to take that into consideration as well, that the cost of not doing this now is probably more than what they're projecting. I also have had very limited opportunity to speak with staff specifically on the semantics of whether or not we could work around this, but what we're saying is that there's no way that we could work with contractors in the future to find a way to minimize the damage to the pathway. The expansion, the road expansion, is happening on the east side. This is on the west side. So surely there's a way to work in a contract to say, please minimize the damage. And with any project that we do at the city, particularly road projects, there is some damage to existing infrastructure. It's part and parcel of what we experience when we do construction. So it's not even incredibly out of the ordinary that we might have some repair costs. So I'm asking you to please consider that you're denying a community active transportation for potentially more than a decade because we're worried about a little bit of throwaway costs. And I don't want to minimize that it's a little bit, but It's probably going to cost us a lot more to not do this now. And in the meantime, residents will have access to a multi-use pathway on the west side of the Parkway that will connect to future infrastructure on Walkley Road. And the Airport Parkway is a 70 to 80 kilometer road. You're not just bombing across to access the east pathway. Like a motorist does not want to share Airport Parkway with a cyclist. The cyclist does not want to share the Airport Parkway with a motorist. So there's mutual benefit to all road users. You know, we've set aggressive targets in our official plan to split the modal share, both on transit, on cycling, pedestrians, and of course the vehicle, which will always be important. This is not about widening the Airport Parkway. This is about delivering active transportation for a community now that we all approved, most of us approved, I believe, in 2023. So please, I urge you to consider today to not support the KITS motion and to move forward. And if for whatever reason you're inclined to support the KITS motion, I will be working on something to hopefully find a solution before council to minimize what is considered to be throwaway costs so that we can move forward with this. But if I haven't convinced you, I'll hope to convince you by council. Thank you.
Great. Your passion is there. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say you didn't need your notes, so I think that worked very well. Yeah, so I actually really appreciate hearing Councillor Bradley go first, because I've been looking at this, trying to understand exactly what this motion is to do. And I think you've helped me to understand that what we're doing is recoupling. That's what this motion is asking us to do. So in 2023, we decoupled, and now this motion is asking to recouple. So whatever happens to this MUP or for this MUP will be contingent on the future of the Airport Parkway decision. It does not become a standalone project. And, you know, I'm thinking a little bit about my conversations on the TMP that's coming up for the spring. And from what I understood, one of the approaches that is being recommended in the new TMP, and I'll ask staff to confirm for me, but one of the approaches that we are taking with the TMP for these major infrastructure projects that span a very long time is we are going to start looking at phasing those projects so that we can build in interim phases to offset construction inflation over time. Is that something that we are starting to consider when we're looking at these larger infrastructure projects, please?
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Chair. So yes, definitely through the Transportation Master Plan, we are looking at opportunities to phase projects to deliver projects as cost effectively as possible. And as part of that, throwaway cost considerations will definitely be part of that discussion in determining what the segments or the intersection improvements would be to minimize throwaway costs to the extent that's possible.
Thank you very much. So, you know, I have to say, I feel quite persuaded. You know, in the outer urban wards, we are not building. I mean, I'll look around to my colleagues that share that area with me. We have been frustrated that we have not been seeing the buildings that have been permitted by this committee and council. And that persists. And so if we find that the future of the investment of this MUP is contingent on the larger Airport Parkway build out, and that Airport Parkway build out is contingent on the collection of development charges, I have to say, I'm fairly convinced that we're not looking at a 1 or 2 year delay for this community. And in the meantime, the idea of phasing larger construction projects appears to me to be consistent with the way we are going to be moving forward for the future of TMP projects. And so for me, I think that the argument is quite persuasive to move forward with building the Airport Parkway component. And given that we will be re-examining the offset of throwaway costs against construction inflation for major projects, I think that that is something we're going to have to actually wrestle with more and more frequently. And we may not, I would argue that we probably won't see them all come through a motion at this committee. But for some reason, this one has. So for that reason, I will not be supporting to recouple the project. I think that it is worthy as a standalone project. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate that Councillor Brockington, you laid out the rationale behind the motion, because it's certainly the Brockington Kits motion, because it certainly does help me appreciate and understand the spirit behind it of ensuring that there's not an overspending. I do appreciate that. My concern, however, is the potential outcomes, potential unanticipated outcomes tied to the uncertainty of the future of the Parkway. And I want to also address what one of the first delegates was saying when he, I believe that was Mr. Wood, was referring to this MUP, the plan to put a MUP on the west side, as an unnecessary waste of scarce funding that provides, quote, marginal additional value because, quote, there already is a MUP on the east. So if we're talking about a widening of a road, by his same definition, that would provide marginal additional value because there already are lanes existing. And so even by his own definition, though, airport widening is an unnecessary waste of scarce funding. And the thing that concerns me is, by what do we define the term necessary? By what measure do we define if the airport parkway widening is even necessary, if the widening of that parkway is meant to provide greater mobility capacity when we already have an LRT line there in the first place? And because I am one of additional voices that are unsure about the future of the Parkway, my concern is, by delaying this project, which already has a stated need, we put this project in complete limbo and jeopardy. And so I guess what I would like to ask the movers, and I think I have to ask staff about some understanding here. It's okay, thank you. Is whether or not could there be a consideration of an amendment to the current motion on the floor that speaks to a sunset clause, whereby if, for example, by such and such a date, there is no commitment or confirmation of beginning Airport Parkway, or if hypothetically, because we may vote during the TMP update not to support Airport Parkway, leaving this MUP in complete limbo by the terms of this motion here. So could there be a willingness, and I think staff might want to weigh in, on a clause whereby if the Parkway is not proceeding by such and such a time, we continue with the plans for the MUP? So to the movers first, I suppose.
Actually, first of all, I think you'd probably want staff to comment on that. Probably be the appropriate way to do it, because are you saying to
a degree,
sorry,
we're debating a motion.
Councillor,
Yep.
1 second.
Yep.
Before you present a motion, which we haven't seen yet, can you add clarity to the fact, this sunset clause, are you saying if nothing happens to go ahead and construct a pathway?
Whether by time X, so let's say whether, because right now we're studying LRT for 2 years. And so let's say perhaps whether by 3 years after having done that study, if hypothetically we determine there is no great data supported need for a widening of the Parkway. So let's say hypothetically by 3 years, there is no commitment to building the widening of the Parkway. Or once we get through the TMP update, if we vote not to support the widening of the Parkway, either of those things may speak to the fact that airport widening might not happen. So by a certain point, we have to make a decision if we're going to go forward with this MUP or not.
Yeah, again, if you wish to submit a motion, that would obviously be something we debate on that. Feel free.
So can I ask, so
I find it odd because there's a whole series of projects I'd love to put timelines on encounters, but without money, it would be very difficult to do so. Now, Catherine Kitts is the mover of the motion, but on behalf of Councillor Brockington, maybe Councillor Brockington, you'd like to speak to that.
Sure, if you just give me some leeway here. Council's approved a motion that said, given the delays with the widening of the Parkway, we want to advance the off-ramp project, which includes the MUP. Okay? Staff have presented concerns as they're in final design of the off-ramp project that the MUP could be impacted when the widening project goes forward. So that's why this motion here is today. Yeah. But my question for staff is, if we take the MUP out, and we bundle it with the airport widening project. And the fear that we heard from delegates and even members here today is that, well, if the widening project timelines could get reprioritized with the TMP and other projects, and we don't know the actual date, then do we want to say, well, after 5 years, if the widening project hasn't happened, the MUP will go ahead? I think that's the question being asked, is we don't want to have an indefinite period of time where we don't know when the MUP is going to be built. And if the Parkway project's going to be booted into the 2030s, that's too late to wait for the MUP to be built. And so does the committee want to consider, if within X number of years the Parkway widening doesn't happen, the MUP will automatically proceed as a project? I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and this is the dangers of not having the language in advance, just to make sure, right? So is that what you're trying to achieve?
Well, in principle, that is what I'm trying to achieve. And so I guess if I don't have the language before me right now, this motion as it stands. So for the reason I was asking the movers first before staff, because we are debating a member's motion, not necessarily the staff position right here. And so if there is willingness on the mover of the motion to accept that, then in spirit, I suppose, if the amendment is not present here right now, to the clerk, would we not have time between, if the Brockington Kits motion passes today, would we have not time between now and council to attach an amendment to that speaking to a sunset clause?
Well, that would be up to you. And I'm looking at Councillor Bradley. I don't know if she's engaged on that either. What's your thoughts? I just saw you.
Sorry, I guess my thoughts is that I think that the time is now, and even with the sunset clause, this project gets more expensive, the costs continue to escalate, and we're back in the same quandary we are now.
Yeah, so the timer might not be.
I don't want to, my first priority is to not have this motion pass so that we can have the pathway
There you
built
go.
now.
So does that give context? Do you wish to move a motion, Councillor Devine?
So based on that, no.
Thank you.
No.
So do you have any further questions? So we can proceed to the next delegation or next speaker.
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gower.
Okay, the 2023 motion. Can someone explain, did it just say delay until 2 years after line 2 is open? So that, well, is that what it said? Or did it say 2 years after we're going to reevaluate whether we need a Parkway widening? It just said, wait 2 years. There was no condition to study the need for the Parkway.
It said that we would review the need after, once we've seen how the LRT travel patterns have impacted the need. So there's a little more, it's not just restart the project as soon as that 2 years is up.
Okay, I hear Councillor Bradley disagreeing and Councillor Brogdon shaking his head with me. So, okay. Does staff have the motion handy? I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, Chair, I do have a copy of the wording of the motion. It states that be it further resolved that funding beyond the 2023 budget, specifically for the construction of the widening of the Airport Parkway between Brookfield Drive and Hunt Club Road, be deferred until the Transportation Master Plan update is completed and after the Trillium Line is operational for 2 years.
Okay, so that would assume that the Transportation Master Plan in some way would take into account new transportation patterns. Yeah, this is getting complicated. So as it stands today, the Airport Parkway is still in the Transportation Plan and it's still happening. The widening of the Airport Parkway. We may change our minds in that over the next few months and decide not to. Can staff tell us at this point, we're about to see a draft of the recommendations on priority projects for the TMP. Where does the Airport Parkway stand now in staff's forthcoming recommendations?
So through the chair, as councillors were informed at the Transportation Master Plan briefing sessions, the Airport Parkway widening remains in the priority road network as a phase 1 project for implementation. Phase 1 projects would be over the next 10 years for implementation.
Okay, so the Airport Parkway widenings in the plan now, it is likely going to be in the plan that we have in front of us as committee in the coming months. I think the motion from Councillor Kitts on behalf of Councillor Brockington makes sense. At some point, if we decide to take out that widening, maybe we need to look at whether there's still a need or how we address the pathway piece. But yeah, I'm okay with the Kitts motion. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for the clarity. Councillor Brockington, did you wish to continue? I'll go to Councillor Dudas first, then Brockington, if we can keep it brief, and then we'll go to wrap up.
Thank you. I just, Councillor Gower asked the question I was going to ask is really how long do we have to wait for the evaluation of the widening? And for me, noticing that the airport is going to be launching a new direct flight from Air Canada. I think it's next week, straight to Heathrow. There's a lot of opportunities that are coming through the airport. We're going to see many more flights. I'm not going to even say fingers crossed. I have a huge amount of confidence that we're going to see the uptick in flights coming in and out of our nation's capital's airport. I strongly believe the widening has to be a priority, and the MUP comes with that. So my concern would be if we come back and we reevaluate and we say, listen, based on current traffic trends, we need to postpone the widening and vis-a-vis postpone the MUP. At the end of the day, I am happy to hear that staff are saying that we're going to be including this as a priority project in the TMP. 10 years is way too long from my perspective. I would love, I'm thinking of the economic aspects of it, and I'm thinking about people going back and forth to the airport. I really do appreciate that the local councillor is thinking about her area, and I want to see that supported. But if we don't have the widening, I don't see why we do the MUP without it. I want both, and I want it tomorrow is how I want us to start funding it appropriately. So I am okay with supporting the motion that Councillor Kitts has on the floor today. But I also want to start working towards seeing that priority projects like this one, which will bring economic prosperity, opportunities, and service every resident who's going back and forth from our airport in the future, is prioritized in a way that we can say in 2027, we know we're moving ahead with it. We're going to fund it appropriately. There'll be shovels in the ground and the MUP comes next to it. So that's where I stand on this. I do understand that the need for MUP is there for the local community. At this point in time, I want the whole project. I want it funded and I want us to prioritize it.
Great. Thank you for that wrap up. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. I'm kind of curious. So I've been throughout this whole discussion, I've been sort of going north and south on Google Maps and the satellite view and everything. And other than at the roundabout at Brookfield, the ramps at Walkley, and the urban interchange at Hunt Club, I don't really see, at least from my perspective, I don't really see true benefit of the Western MUP while there is an Eastern MUP. So I know that in our own conversation, Councillor Brockington told me that it's difficult to access the Eastern MUP from Walkley. Perhaps there's a challenge to access it from Hunt Club as well, but it's all backed by private properties. There's no true easier access into it. So unless I'm missing something, like right now, the Western MUP to me just seems like I don't want to say useless, but like it seems difficult to access. It's like there's the 3 access points to that future Western MUP whenever it's built seems to be exactly the same as the Eastern MUP. So unless either of the local councillors can help clear out the picture for me, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm generally supportive of the motion, but I also don't see the immediate need just because of the exact same sort of access points to it.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bradley, and then Councillor Brockington.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify something. First of all, as I said, we're not arguing the value of the MUP. We're arguing the timing. It's already in the TMP. It's already been identified as needed. So I just want to make that very clear. Second of all, with respect to you know, let's fund the airport parkway widening. This, I don't want to conflate the need for the airport parkway widening with this MUP. I'm not here advocating to not have the airport parkway widened today. Today, I am talking about the MUP. And in 2013, our TMP put this project in phase 1 priority. That does not mean now. It was supposed to be done in 2019. It did not happen. We say, let's fund it. Well, it's like 80% funded by development charges. So we don't have a lot of control over how that funding comes in. It's not all tax supported. And so again, even though we just heard from staff that the TMP is putting it in phase 1 priority projects, that does not mean it's going to rank first or that the funding is guaranteed to come in the timeframe in which is laid out in the TMP. The TMP is not a budget document. It is a guide of how we need to move around this city and the capacity that we need to build in order for people to move around this city. And so we cannot take what the TMP says verbatim. I don't think any one of us talks to our constituents, looks at the TMP and says, well, you know what, I think that's going to happen in 2025 because we know it's subject to funding availability and how DCs come in. So I just want to be very clear that while that sounds great, phase 1 priority project, that does not mean that it is happening tomorrow. And I can guarantee you, you know, if we're back around this table next term, we won't be constructing the airport parkway in 2027. So I just really don't want you to conflate the airport parkway widening and the need with how we've decoupled these projects. We already committed to the community that we were moving forward with these two pieces. And it's not just a MUP, it's an Walkley off-ramp that serves vehicles. So these were the two projects that we kept together. This can't be a standalone project because it changes the way that it's funded, right? When you couple it with a road project, you take advantage of the fact that you're getting like 80% from development charges. You decouple it and it's a standalone, it's a lot less for active transportation. That probably should be fixed too, but that's a conversation for another day. But phase 1 does not mean tomorrow. So please think about it that way, that just because the airport parkway widening will stay on the books, the AVTC stayed on the books for 60 years. It didn't happen either. So I just want to be very clear that it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Brock, I'll let the other people speak first. More have come on the board. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Bradley on what she's saying, and she's obviously looked at this very closely. It does concern me that the MUP would get more and more expensive the more you delay it, and that is problematic. And I know you know the area, so the chances of being able to do other work later is possible. I feel like we've totally forgotten that there's this train that goes to the airport now, and we're still talking about the widening of the Parkway. I think that's got to be a factor, and we have to look at how these things work. Yes, there's going to be more flights to the airport, but we just built a train to get out there. So that's what this was all about, getting more people efficiently. You know, and the MUP is very valuable. I have ridden on the airport parkway on my bike. I don't recommend it, but I have, and it's scary. So MUPs are very valuable. They're valuable to cyclists and to cars. We don't want to mix them. So I think that this motion should not go forward. I don't have a vote, but just wanted to have my say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Committee Member Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I don't usually jump on twice, but I feel that this is a fascinating conversation that I can't get enough of. I will fight you to the death for anything that's on the priority list for phase 1 TMP. And I actually think that we all will for our own projects. I was reminded in this conversation, you know, that we all assured another councillor to my right that when we moved his development in Stittsville, that there was a transportation project that was absolutely necessary, that we absolutely must prioritize in order to justify that development. So I think, unfortunately, the TMP priority, as much as it's a nice to have, it's certainly not going to be a solution for our immediate problems. And right now, the design for this MUP and Walkley off-ramp is in the bag. Like, this is why we are both arguing for its immediate sensitivity to be recoupled, but also why the recoupling is less necessary. We're halfway down this road to get this stuff already. So we would not only be incurring inflation costs by delaying, but we would be suspending work that's happened in the past. And I for this reason, I think that's why we actually moved ahead with the decoupling project in 2023. Also, how long has the Trillium line been open? How long has the Trillium line been open so far? A couple weeks. Okay, so within the original motion in 2023, we said 2 years until the Trillium line motion, or the Trillium line is open. So by doing this, we are advancing the data assumptions by almost the entirety of the motion that we put in place in 2023. It's not an appropriate evidence-based decision. There are costs that we do not yet have in front of us in terms of inflation that would factor into a cost benefit analysis. And the community has been asking for it. And in fact, we assured them it would happen. So the recoupling of these two projects, I think, both has an economic downside, it has a trust downside, and it has a data downside. So personally, I think it's unwise. And that's why I wanted to jump on again, because I think there's just too much to be said to advance the project that's already in the works. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Our last speaker, Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I'm having a bit of a flashback because 24 years ago, I sat here at the table articulating the need for this off-ramp. Terry Wood's position of transportation chair, I was that chair in Riverside Park and advocated for that off-ramp. And here we still are talking about it for sure. There have been many issues raised today, but I think the question for staff is this. The concerns about the timeline, I think, are a major concern. So if we decouple and if the Parkway project gets deferred into the future, would staff be open to committing to building them up before the Parkway is widened itself? So if it's decoupled today, would staff consider that as an option? Because we don't want to not build them up for 10 years, potentially 15 years. This was on the premise that if the Parkway was going to be widened in a couple years, I'm paraphrasing staff, it didn't make sense to build them up now and then close it and damage it and have to repair it. But if, hypothetically, the Parkway isn't widened for many years into the future, would you revisit the MUP option?
So through the chair, so if a decision was made through council to not widen the airport parkway or to move it to the needs-based network, for example, where it would not be prioritized for implementation, then I think we would be open to having those discussions, and there could be a path forward for constructing them up in advance.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm just going to park it there, Chair, because I think I've spoke before as the meeting started. No one is questioning the value of MUP or of active transportation. There's a lot of factors at play here, and I appreciate the discussion that we've had. Thanks, Chair.
Great, and so the mover of the motion, Vice Chair Kitts, no one else is looking to speak. I'm just going to wrap up quickly. It's been a great debate and great discussion. And, you know, back in the day, I supported Councillor Bradley just a few years ago, I think, when we decoupled. My bad. You know what? Maybe we wouldn't be talking about this today if we didn't decouple it. So you've brought in the discussion. What we're really dealing with here today has nothing to do with coupling or not coupling. It's we don't have money in this city. And I'll just give a quick story about when I was elected to council. And I was very excited to promote the fact I was getting Ogilvie Road resurfaced, working with Rainer Blois, trying to get some pathways in. I put big brochures out. I touted the fact we're going to pave the road. And then the sewage department came back to me after my brochures were out and said, oh, we're going to have to rip up that road after we pave it. I said, this is probably not what my constituents want. I don't think any constituent wants to see waste of money. So I had to go back to my constituents during an election year and say, it will be done. It will be done, but right now it doesn't make sense. The money isn't there to do it all. We're going to have to wait a little bit longer. It was appreciated. We're in a very similar situation now where we're talking about, are we going to burn $1 million? That's literally what we're talking about. There is a pathway on one side already. It would be great to have it on the other side. And when it comes to widening, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe, apparently we're burning Teslas now, so we don't know if there will even be a car in the future. What this vote is about is, and I'm going to call for the vote, do we want to spend almost $1 million to rip it back out in the future? So on the motion that's put forward by Councillor Kitts, I'll ask our committee chair or coordinator, I'm the chair, to call for the vote. Thank you. And just to be very clear, if you support Vice Chair Kitts's motion, you're saying, no, we're not going to waste the money.
Chair, point of order. I don't think it's fair that if I do not vote to support the Brockington motion, you are putting words in my mouth where I am saying that I'm willing to waste $1 million. Chair, I don't think that's fair.
Well, if you wish to challenge the chair, it's certainly a wrap-up component and we all do it. So do you wish to challenge the chair?
I wish to ask the chair not to interpret what my vote means.
Well, what is on the table is, are we going to spend $875,000 knowing full out that it will be removed later? Is that more precise?
Theoretically, we may be wasting money by not doing enough.
Okay,
because
look, I've called for the vote. If you wish to challenge,
contextualize the vote.
Well, it's literally in the motion. It actually says $875,000. So do you wish to challenge the chair?
I'm not sure what that means. I'm just saying, please do not interpret what my vote means.
Okay, well, it's quite clear. So on that, do you wish to go ahead and call the vote, please?
Councillor Luloff,
Yes.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor Gower,
Yes.
Councillor Johnson,
No.
Councillor Devine,
Nope.
Councillor Bradley,
No.
Councillor Troster,
No.
Councillor DeRush,
Yes.
Councillor Lowe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kitts,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Great, thank you. So on to the final part of the agenda. We do have just a notice of motion. So I'll put the notice of motion up on the screen. And this is just in reaction to some of the conversations that have been taking place, even though we're not looking until September to deal with the bus lane issue on Bank Street. But whereas this, and this is just strictly notice of motion, whereas the city is currently undertaking a feasibility study to identify the opportunities to improve transit and active transportation on Bank Street between Highway 417 and the Rideau Canal, as shown in document 1 attached to this motion. Whereas the changes to Bank Street have the potential to generate increased traffic on side streets connecting Queen Elizabeth Driveway, many of which are one-way. Whereas residents in the area have intended to submit a petition concerning the current traffic issues. Oh, thank you. I'll read on this. Yeah, no, that's correct. That's correct. A petition concerning the current traffic issues, therefore be resolved that part of the Bank Street active transportation and transit priority feasibility study, staff be directed to review the impacts of the recommended changes to the Bank Street on adjacent community streets that could be used as cut-through zones or cut-through routes to develop the appropriate mitigation measures as required. And there is a map attached with it. We'll deal with that at the next Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Great. So on that, Kelly, I'm okay. Good. I'm good. So we'll go to adjournment. The next meeting Oh, yes, we have your inquiry, Councillor Bradley. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Chair. This is really just in response to the numerous emails many of us have received from concerned parents with the boundary changes for the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. So the school crossing guard program represents a critical safety component for our youngest pedestrians, particularly with these unprecedented OCDSB boundary changes approaching. Given the significant increase in young children who may need to cross busy intersections to reach their new schools, what specific mechanisms or processes are in place to evaluate these new high-risk crossing points, respond to resident concerns, and ensure appropriate crossing guard coverage at these locations before the September 2026 implementation date? Thank you.
Councillor Bradley, and thank you for that. We're all talking PXOs these days and crossing guards, so that's good. So on to the final part, adjournment. Our next meeting of PWIC will take place on Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. Thank you very much, everybody.